Peace and respect to you all. Welcome to Demolished Doctrine, the beginning of the end of religion. And by you all, I mean Mac and Krishna. No, to anyone that might watch this in the future. Peace and respect to you, truly. Okay, so we were talking off air, and these shows we just kind of, go off the cuff with whatever happens. So our conversation worked into the four major time frames and the chronology of the quote unquote end times.
Mm-hmm.
Which I understand, Krishna, you wouldn't think there would be an end times, would you? Love to see a comment on that. But what was it we were talking about exactly, Mac? Or I could just start off.
Well, we sort of naturally wandered into the idea of the second half of end times and what each of us will be up to in that time, like speculating on it a little bit. And you mentioned that you've been exploring Revelation again rather successfully, in your opinion, with MacTheHuman. And I was like, well, I got to check that out because I haven't kept up with that. But you said you just talked about the four horsemen, and I think you were about to kind of expound on that.
He's using his first name publicly now. Robbie or MacTheHuman on YouTube, which he has a very, very interesting channel. He's a brilliant guy. He's a nice guy. And he and I are doing the Book of Revelation. It's the fourth series that we've done in comparative religion. And in the view that I hold, because he doesn't agree with me, but he does find it interesting. And we're working on the Book of Revelation, and we have just passed. We're now at chapter 6, which means we just did the four horsemen. And I know what religious people say about the four horsemen, and that they are all bad. But the four horsemen are the major time frames. They represent major time frames and major events in Ragnarok, in end times. If I said that someone was biblically, they were dressed in white, what does white represent?
Purity.
Purity. And if I said they were given a sword, biblically, what would that mean?
The truth.
The truth. And if I said they were given a bow and arrow, what would that mean biblically?
I'm not as sure about that one.
Hunter provider.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. So, and if I said something were red, what does that mean biblically?
Well, usually represents blood.
Yeah, it's usually associated to war, violence, blood, those things.
Right.
Also, miry pits, like a slime pit.
Oh.
Biblically, definitionally. And then you have, of course, the black horseman. And I'm going to skip over him temporarily. And if I said something were given pestilence and death, that's the nasties, the spread of disease, infection. Mac, were you aware that the word pale in pale horse, it actually has a very specific kind of pale? No, it's the yellow-green ooze that comes from infected sores.
Oh my goodness.
That's what it means. That pale. So light-colored, greenish, yellowish, crappy gunk full of infection and nastiness. That's the pale.
Okay, so definitely disease, like specifically disease,
etc.
Yeah.
Yes.
Ugh.
So the average Christian mistake is death and hell follow them, and them means all four horsemen, when the only one that has a mate, a pair, is the fourth horseman. And hell and death follow them. Those two. Here's why I say that. All of them are given something except for the black horseman. he already has. Would you know what he has? Because most people don't much touch the book of Revelation.
I don't know. I don't much touch it either. Does he have death?
He has a set of balances in his hand.
Oh, okay. Huh.
So if I said biblically someone had a set of balances, what do balances represent?
That's justice.
Justice, judgment, law,
Right.
those things. So if I said someone already had the law and it wasn't to be given to them, who's that?
Somebody already had the law and it wasn't to be given to them?
Right. They are justice, they are judgment, they are the law, and they already have it. It's not given to them.
Wow.
Who's that?
Well, that would be God.
No kidding. Now, is there any question why he arrives on a black horse? Space.
Oh. Oh, I was still tying the black horse to death.
Mm-hmm. Yep, we've been taught that. Okay, so the one going forward, conquering and to conquer. He has two missions, and he's wearing a crown, and he is the hunter provider. And then he starts war. He makes war with men with the sword. And then arrives the black horseman. And then death and hell are on the pale horse, the fourth horse. That is the rise of the beast, and his association, his direct association with Satan, comes after the arrival of God.
I see. After the herald of God and then the arrival of God.
Right.
Right. I see it.
Yep. It's really clean and easy. So you've got those four major time frames, and then the seven trumpets fit within those, and then the seven plagues fit within the trumpets. And they're offset. They're not a one-to-one. But we could go over all that. It would take days.
Mm-hmm. That's crazy. I've never heard about that before. I've never heard you talk about that part of it before. That's pretty cool.
So I think anyone who's reasonable, and by reasonable I mean actually reasonable, not like loosely reasonable, like they use reason. By the time that the halftime show starts, they're already going to be convinced that those signs were the actual signs. And the signs are for an evil nation. Obviously, a believer doesn't need convinced heaven and God exist.
Right.
It's for the non-believer. And I think it's going to work. I think there'll be enough Christians going, okay, this is that sign, and the atheist, agnostic, whomever right there beside them won't be able to deny it. By the time it's 7 in the row in the course of 3.5 years.
That seems reasonable to me.
So I think that you will be in heaven by the time the second half starts. Oh, here's something interesting in that book. Merchantmen who owned ships and had great wealth because of the whore. That is the earth. Merchandising.
Mm-hmm.
Will be a safe distance from the earth as it's being destroyed. Looking at it, lamenting it. Now, the only safe place to be while the earth is being destroyed is heaven, which means they're on the glass floor, the crystalline floor, in the basement of God's habitation or the mercy seat, watching the earth being destroyed, and they still don't get that they're in heaven.
Wow. What if there's people on the ISS?
There's a story about that.
That's what came to my mind when you were saying that.
Yeah. Part of the covenant is that none will be spared. Everyone gets judged. Everyone either goes to heaven or is destroyed with the planet. It's true dichotomy. There's no third option. Okay. So there's a biblical story about Joseph. He becomes in charge. He becomes a tax collector for the enemy, and or what is perceived as enemy. I'll put it that way. And some of his brothers who don't recognize him being sold into slavery. That is, it's a story about Jesus. He sees his brothers, and he knows some are missing. So he holds some and sends some away to go and fetch his brothers, his other brothers. That's the whole everyone will do this. He says that they stole the covenant, a chalice. But they literally do steal the covenant by not having all the brothers there. So there's a story about some of his brothers fetching his other brothers. I.e., no one stays on the space station. Angels can breach that. And it might be that, Elon Musk has a launch, and there's some other people, not just the International Space Station. Could be other stuff too. I don't know.
I mean, those are the great shipbuilders. On the planet, anyway.
Oh, yeah.
Those guys, Bezos and Musk.
Yep. Yeah, they're just not watercraft.
Right.
Peace and respect to Dr. Cross. Oh, she followed you over here after that comment, Mac.
I know.
You are a cutie, I gotta say, if I was a gay man.
Oh, it's so flattering. I have to say, there's a lot of good community on the YouTubes. Wildheart and I had a private Google chat last night, and all we just kept doing was talking about all the names of the people we know that are great individuals that surround this space. And it's really a pleasure to be among you all. So,
well, I hope everyone feels as I do, that it's a pleasure to know all of you people. I mean, we have to discourage certain behaviors and attract and encourage other behaviors. And if you encourage those better behaviors, you end up with people like Mac.
Thank you.
That's how it works. It takes a while.
Right.
I mean, there are plenty of conversations out there I don't want to have. I don't want a preacher, whether they're a preacher for atheism or Hinduism or Christianity or whatever religion. I don't want a religious preacher.
Right.
I hope that I don't come across as one.
Right.
The Dr. Cross, a 3-minute elevator speech, what this channel is. Let's see. Christianity based in Judaism has presupposed context and reading frame for the Bible and think it's exclusive to other religions. A more open, broad-minded view reveals that indeed all of the religions are saying the same thing in different ways for different social structures in fairy tale form, so that a series of events that the authors of these stories perform transforms the fairy tales into reality, so that the people who witness it can understand and accept what is ultimately an invitation into a much more established, much more powerful, much larger human society. That's my elevator pitch right now. I just made that up, but that was all accurate to what I believe is true.
That was good. That was fleshier than it usually is.
I'm working on it.
Yeah, so I spend a bunch of time thinking about religion and God and what it all means and stuff. And met Richard because of that, and because of his openness and accepting interlocutors and just people into his life. But when I was getting ready for today's chat, I started thinking about my screen name that I chose when I started doing these videos, and started thinking what it meant to be a human. I sometimes use the old Discordian joke about how I'm a human and not a cabbage or something, which is funny, but also like, the Bible talks about what it means to be a human all over the place. And I think consistently, whether it's innuendo or whether it's explicitly stated, the definition of a human is constantly connected with the idea of God, with the at least the potential achievement of of what God is. And it's called, Richard reminded me of the word, it's called vivification, or often is called vivification, and this promise that we have, but it's also like a definition, and it comes, right from Genesis. There's the whole made in our image part, is definitional, right away in the text about what a human is. And that's not what I meant when I chose that name. I meant something much more humble. I meant, I'm a human. I intend to interact with other humans, and that's all I'm going to claim. But interacting with Richard and with honestly, with people from different spiritual traditions, what a human is can be understood to be something greater, much greater than what I intended to mean. So I might have to change the name because it might come off as too braggadocious. But so when we first intersected tonight, I hit Richard with Isaiah 13:12, which in the English Standard Version says, "I will make people more rare than fine gold, and mankind than the gold of Ophir." I actually don't know what Ophir is. It's probably a city that has a specific meaning that is instructional in the passage. if I know this,
That was
whole
way
routine well enough.
generalized. Of course, you're right, but you
Yeah.
just you just
I
said
don't know
such a
what it
broad
is.
statement.
Probably means something very
It means
indicative of the
something, and
truth.
it's a lesson. Yep,
Yeah.
but you can always say that. Yeah, I'm gonna find it for you while you talk.
Let's do it. So Richard said, that word rare is better interpreted as precious. And I said, well, what's the difference? He said, well, when you say rare, people start to make arguments about exclusivity and about how, only some people are going to be as fine as gold. And it completely struck me that is, of course, that's the common understanding of Christianity, is that there's only a few people that are going to make it, that hell is going to get overcrowded and real estate's going to get real expensive, even though it sucks to live there. And it's going to be just like, San Francisco. And no, but heaven's just going to be like sparsely populated with the few people that can be refined like this. And I've given up thinking about it that way. I don't think about any of these passages as indicating any kind of exclusivity in the people that are, receiving salvation from this planet, and from the suffering and death that we now endure. More rare can definitely mean more refined, more polished, more precious, I think was the word Richard gave me. So let's see what Ophir means in Genesis 10:29 first.
Surprising, 13 times.
Wow. Sounds like a
You would
Greek
think of no more of a
name.
rare word than that, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to do two of them just to make sure that it's the same word. Ophir.
H211.
Ophir 211.
Mm-hmm.
Let's look at a third one.
Seems to be connected with gold.
Ophir.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. It's always 211, as far as I can tell here.
Mm-hmm.
Wrong button. Ophir, an F sound.
Okay.
How you like that?
Reducing to ashes. Characteristic of fine gold.
Mm-hmm.
So it's redundant.
Well, it's the idea of overheating.
Hmm.
And of course, the idea of fine gold, refined gold would probably be better right there.
Mm-hmm.
But those are usages, those aren't definitions.
Right.
And we don't have any etymology here. I could go to like etymology.com or just called etym.com and look up the word itself and see if I could find what it means, but that's going to be a little bit cumbersome. I don't think it's really necessary. Okay, so
that's okay.
Yeah, the golden wedge of Ophir. Is taken and hidden away. And it's hidden under a tent.
Hmm.
And the people are you can disagree with group punishment. It makes the one who hid it away obvious. And he comes forward and admits it, that he is the one who has the golden wedge of Ophir.
Hmm.
And he's, how's it put? He himself is hidden among the stuff.
Therefore I will shake the heavens, and the earth shall remove out of her place in the wrath of the Lord of hosts, and in the day of his fierce anger. A wedge is a separating tool.
Mm-hmm. But it's a golden wedge.
Yeah.
It's a good separating tool.
Perfect.
It's a very valuable, most refined, most etc.
Right.
Tried by fire.
Reduced to ashes and purified. Well, there's a lot more to that verse than just talking about what a human is. It seems. It would seem.
Well, I know it's super repetitive, and I know that Christians already say the Bible's all about Jesus, but I'm saying the Bible's really all about Jesus.
Right.
I mean, if you want to take some ignorant person and make them exactly what you need them to be, it's going to take some effort. It's going to take some writing. It's going to take some education.
Well, where do you want to go from here? I feel like we maybe wrapped that up pretty quickly, Isaiah 13:12.
I think there's good reason why the Bible calls us man instead of being of light or angel.
Mm-hmm.
Which doesn't mean a being made of light. It means a being who is enlightened.
Right.
I've heard that claim way too many times. Oh, they're made of light.
Right.
No. No, their mind is now enlightened.
Right.
which is why you always have the bright face, the burning bush. The face of God is a bright and shining thing in the sky. That's why you keep having this. It's about opening the mind. It's not about.
Right.
It's, what is that movie, Powder? Where the guy turns into literal energy.
Right. Yeah. No, that's sort of a silly concept. I mean, that would be a being that would have a hard time influencing things. They were pure energy.
Any transfer of pure energy, any energy that's moving, draws every kind of material toward it. So you could influence the physical realm as long as you move.
Right. Move with some kind of intention. I mean,
You
I'm
could.
just thinking about, can light make a U-turn? Can light say, I want to go to a different direction than
It
the
does.
direction I'm heading in?
It does. We call it gravitational lensing.
Oh, right. But that's not a choice. That's just something.
Oh, does the light have a choice now?
Yeah, it doesn't. Yeah.
No.
I know it can bend. Yeah. But it's pretty much stuck on its course, I guess in a lot of ways, so are we,
That's an interesting topic. Is there free will?
I mean, we have brushed on that before, and you've talked about your concept of free won't, which is, I think, inadequate, but also really interesting. But I think it's theologically appropriate to say that there is no such thing as free will. I think it makes sense if there's an overarching kind of master of all reality that that would include everything that will ever happen. And so it's the Greeks struggled with this way before there was Christianity and stuff. They struggled with this idea that if fate is a thing, then what are we doing? And it's, from what I understand, it's present in a lot of different traditions. So that same question, if fate is a real thing, then what are we doing? Then we don't have any kind of any kind of will at all. And so, but that's incongruent with our experience. We seem to experience free will. We seem to experience the availability of choices in every moment of our existence. So, it's not an easy issue. If you believe in God, that kind of God, then you really have to give up your idea of free will, which is hard to do because we experience it. We experience, that we steer our own ship to a great extent. So, I mean, I guess you could say, well, do you really have free will? You have to pay taxes, and you have to, go to work, and you have to, but that's not really true. I mean, we don't really have to. I mean,
No, you don't have to.
We'll say we have to, but you don't really have to. That's different epistemologically, I mean, we'll say we have to, but it's not really true. You don't have to go the speed limit, you don't have, whatever, you don't have to do anything. You just sit around and wait for stuff to happen around you if you want, and that's an option. So, all right, so where do you fall on the free will thing? Oh, hey,
First
Dale.
of all, peace and respect to Dale Kelly.
Yeah.
And I never said hi to Wildheart. Hi, Wildheart. To the Dr. Cross, free will kills the idea of God. Look into open theism. Because it's harmful to a lot of theists, but not universally. That's just not true. I'm not trying to be harsh. It's just a fact that that's not true. Okay. I will make attempts and err and fail and learn. And when something works or someone tells me something is going to work, someone interferes with my process, and I try it and it does work, I will continue to use it. That's not a choice. None of that was choice. It's the reality dictates what will and will not work. I have to use what works.
Right.
So there's no choice in that.
Okay.
I think part of the definition, or at least a normative definition, a commonly used definition of free will, would include that I could do something because I will to do it.
Right.
But then, if that were true, I would have to know all the options that I could will toward any given option. So I'm limited by my options just for lack of knowledge.
Okay, so it's not completely free.
Right.
But you would have freedom within the options you're aware of.
Yes. So I say it's and let's say more than one thing worked in a certain scenario. Well, if more than one thing worked, you could choose between the things. Mm-hmm. You know, and still survive and continue on in whatever relationship, hunting for food, performing a task, whatever it is you're doing. Does my butt look big in these jeans?
Classic.
You have options there. You know, you don't have to say no. Your butt looks big out of the jeans as well. You could say something else. You have options.
Right.
But you could choose from probably several things that you know will work in that scenario and use any one of them. So you have free choice in that. But you don't have free will, because free will, I think, and you could have something else. Mm-hmm. Free will, I think, assumes all possibilities are known. I know they're not.
Sure.
Okay. Because we would be done with science if we had.
Of course.
We would be done with the scientific investigation. We'd just have it at the end. Well, we ran out. Everybody, you're fired.
Right. I guess.
Sorry,
no
guys.
More questions.
There's no more questions to be answered, so you're all fired. Get out of here. NASA has been disassembled now.
Well, you definitely have to, I mean, that has to be accepted. None of us have a full scope of the available knowledge that is possible. I mean, and even if we did, we would never know that to be true. There'd be no way to confirm it. There'd always be a possibility that there's something else to find out somewhere around some corner that we haven't seen yet. But I think, the experience of making the choice between the options, whether maybe we don't even make the best choice between the options, that still feels like it's coming from someplace that's ours, that's personal to us, that isn't influenced by anything external or influenced by any necessity that's driving us, that's sort of metaphysical or, I mean, we are free to make poor choices, for instance, it seems.
We do.
So, yeah, it sure seems demonstrable that that's a choice. Well, maybe it's not a choice, but we definitely make those choices. Maybe it's not freely, but we definitely make them.
Yeah, the rest of the question is, could you do something that you wouldn't do?
Right.
You could never do something that you wouldn't do. Even if you try to be inventive and go away from your normal path, then it was in your nature to, in that moment, be inventive and go away from your normal path. Okay. You can't avoid being you.
Right. Okay. Fair enough.
So I'm not saying it's like chemically predetermined. I'm not saying it's genetically predetermined. I'm not saying it's even in nurture predetermined. Mm-hmm. I'm just saying that right now our minds are such that we are a collection of our experiences. And you are going to choose from your experience what you think is best in that particular situation. And everyone does 100% of the time. When a person chooses to steal, murder, etc., I could go on forever about all of the horrible things that we do. Maybe without end. I think I might die of old age before I finished. I truly believe they literally have no choice. That they believe that they are doing the best thing they could in that moment. And they are. It's just they don't have a lot of options. And maybe they're not very good at thinking, and maybe their emotion overrides their logic too readily.
Right.
And lots of other factors: desperation, right. Depression, hatred.
Sure. Self-hatred.
Self-hatred, sure.
Yeah.
I was having an argument with a man last night on the street who accused me of making stereotypes about LGBTQ++. And that was his way of saying, you don't know what you're talking about. You're obviously uneducated because you're an obvious straight person who doesn't understand. But my argument is that no one ever had a choice. Oh, his objection was the powers that be are making argument against people in the community saying they were born that way because it sounds like an excuse. Like saying, I don't have a choice. I was born this way, and you have to forgive me because it wasn't my choice. And I said, well, I think the correct answer to that is all of us are born whatever way we are.
Right.
And that's what it's really saying.
And true.
None of us have a choice.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. It's
now
what
you
we
can
all have
you
in
can
common.
think about it. You can keep yourself in check. You can try to make better decisions. You can learn about decision making. You can learn about more options, right?
Right.
And all of that would increase your number of choices.
Right.
That'd be great. You're still going to be you, though.
That's true.
Okay, so is it predetermined? And my argument against predetermination, so I'll take the other side of the fence now. My argument against predetermination.
Okay.
When someone afflicts themselves onto you other than of your option and other than by your provocation, did you have a choice?
Definitely not.
Okay, was it predetermined
that was in the
by
definition. By you? No.
Yeah. See, it wasn't. So it can't be your predetermined situation. So there's too many variables to say something's predetermined. It can't be that either.
Right. Well, I was thinking, like, sometimes my imagination goes wild when I consider the capability of a very advanced civilization. I mean, they might be able to do some kind of like highly complex mathematics that allows them to do to take advantage of the butterfly effect or something like that, and actually lead to specific situations, like when a coffee cup gets knocked off of a table at a certain time of day or something like that. Like, that's not inconceivable, because there would be a direct chain of events, or there could be a direct chain of events that could be, you say,
the math would have to
variables.
exist for something like that, right?
That's what I'm saying. I mean, for us, it's too many variables, but maybe not for somebody else. I mean, somebody that could, consider more variables in an adequate way. But
someone
that's
who
dreaming.
Could cross
a
singular galaxy.
Right. Well, yeah. We don't really know what else they could do, but maybe. I mean, it wouldn't be too much of a stretch to say, And at this moment, we're gonna flap this butterfly's wing. That's gonna make everything go exactly how we want. I think that might map onto, I don't know if he's still around, that might map onto what Dale believes, and Ace and those guys. Kind of that style of predetermination, where like really every moment is part of the plan. Yeah, let's mix it up a little. Let's invite some people.
Anyone who wants to come in, help yourself.
Nice. But I guess that's not important in the long run. I mean, whether it's granularly predetermined or not, I mean, we still have to reckon with our experience, and I still have to get through day-to-day life, and I appear to be presented with difficult choices pretty continuously, every day. So,
Sure.
and I'm hardly ever confident about the direction that I go, and so it's difficult to think about that in terms of, well, it's all predetermined, or it's all, it's not my will anyway that's being done. It's something else at work. Well, I don't find that very helpful or liberating or comforting or anything, even if it's true. Doesn't help me too much. People say that it helps them let go or something, like achieve some kind of Zen state, but it doesn't do that for me. I still have to make good choices as often as possible. So, hey, Wild Heart.
Please respect Wild Heart.
Speaking of good choices, the master of good choices here.
Now, what were you saying in the side chat?
I'm just saying that just to say that something is predetermined, it doesn't mean it's predetermined by you. It could be like the facts of the universe. Just make something just predetermined. It had to be that way, just due to the facts of the universe.
Are you talking about physics?
Yeah.
Of course, a
lie,
lot is predetermined by physics, sure, but I'm not really talking about that.
All right. Okay.
I'm talking about personality differences and whether or not, okay, like, give me your critique of karma.
I'm struggling to fight against saying karma is BS.
Because
I don't believe in it. I don't think it exists.
Well, it's obviously BS, but why?
Yeah, what's your critique?
Because the universe doesn't care. The universe isn't going around making things right because you did something. It doesn't care.
It's also not correcting you because you did something wrong.
Yeah.
Okay, who is?
The only person... The only you can do that.
What is? Because something is correcting people.
The conscience, the
self.
Basically you.
Okay.
Yeah. That makes sense. Thank you very much.
Self and others around you. That's who's doing karma.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah. I got you know.
So it's not predetermined, but even if I believed that karma were magical, which I don't think it is. I think it's just how humans work.
Yeah.
It's a third person observation on a first person experience. It's weird. So it's us punishing ourselves and others around us punishing us or rewarding ourselves. That's what it is. And that's not magic.
That makes sense.
That makes sense. And that goes back to functionality as well. And like what works best, not just for you, but for society and the people around you as well. Like that's self-correcting mechanism kicks in.
I think it's for people who think they're supposed to be responsible, but don't want to accept responsibility. Yeah. So they make it a once removed thing, and that's most comfortable for them.
Yeah.
Now I think I'm irresponsible because I'm stupid.
Yeah, definitely. There's one thing you're not, is stupid.
Yeah.
No, I'm serious. Compared to what we will be, I'm convinced I'm basically retarded. In a comparative, I think Einstein is also retarded compared to what he's going to be. And that if there's one thing I can see in the writing of religious stories is that they're extremely dumbed down and overly simplified. Because it's actually a lot more complicated than that. And it's being spoken in a very, very simple way. I mean, I'm smart enough to know that when someone's talking down to me in a respectful way, I can tell that.
Right.
Okay. Of course, ultimately, it's for the intended reader, which is an individual mind, which circles right back around to predestination. They get the idea of predestination, which is mostly a religious argument, because of what the text says to the reader. Of course he's predetermined. He's had a job since before he was ever born. He had a job since the beginning of the earth. It says so in no uncertain terms.
Right.
That's as
So of
predetermined
course
as it
he's
gets.
predetermined, but the mistake is that everyone who happens to find the letter written to a certain brain thinks it's for them.
Right.
It's not addressed dear anyone.
Huh.
To my lovely humans, any character mentioned in this story is purely fictional. Any resemblance to any person living or dead is purely coincidental. Yeah, you don't get that.
Great disclaimer. I love that. No, seriously, I think I can make a pretty good case for it only being for Jesus. I think I can make a pretty good case for that. I mean, if we have some glimpse of it and it makes some positive impact in our lives, great.
Yeah, so that makes sense. I mean, that kind of predetermination is the same time that, goes into a job description. Like, this is
Sure.
what you're going to do when you get to work. If you
Yeah,
do the job
that's
right,
pretty good.
that's what you're going to go do. You're going to get there and punch in, and then you're going to inspect this area, and then you're going to go have this meeting, and then you're going to, by the end of it, you're going to punch out.
How about a really cheesy analogy? Is anyone familiar with the Never-Ending Story, the children's movie?
Yeah.
Yes.
Awesome movie.
Yeah.
Okay, so the boy is in the attic of, I think, the library,
Mm-hmm.
and he finds a book and starts reading it because he's stuck there and he's locked in the library. And eventually he figures out that he's the hero of the story,
Right.
that the book is actually about him.
That's right.
That's spooky.
He reluctantly accepts that throughout the movie.
I wonder if they did that on purpose or if it was inspired through some kind of accidental prayer. Because that's exactly what happens with the youth, the child who leads them. It directly says a child will lead them. It doesn't mean a literal physical child. It means mentally a child. I.e. inexperienced, unlearned. Which doesn't really work with the whole Jesus made birds out of clay and they flew away and he resurrected one of his friends he pushed off a roof. It doesn't really work with that very well, does it? But
No. The fan fiction.
Yeah, the fan fiction stuff.
They're great stories, though.
Okay, if you're going to say like it's a great story, like it has a lot of personal human interest and it gets your attention easily and it's easy to remember and things like that. If that's what you mean by a great story, then sure, it's a great story. I think it's horribly detrimental.
Yeah.
And it's anti-biblical and it's anti-truth. And it's not pitched as fiction.
That's true. Well, it might have been originally, but it isn't currently. That's for sure.
Right.
Yeah. We don't really know the context of those books from the time period, like what they were really doing. It might have literally been fan fiction.
Actually, I think of the samples I've taken from the Dead Sea Scrolls, they were all fan fiction.
Makes sense.
And it's not exactly as innocent as fan fiction because it's not pitched that way. It's pitched as the actual thing.
Gotcha.
At least today, when there's fan fiction, the person identifies themselves as a fan and says it's additional fiction.
Right.
They're not going to claim that the writer of Batman wrote that.
Right.
They're not going to claim that.
That's true.
But these people did, and they knew they weren't.
Well, that wasn't seen as a bad thing back then, was it? Like,
Well, that's a good point. If I said something like copyright, that would be a presentism fallacy. You're right.
Yeah, he wasn't seen as a bad thing to kind of pretend to be someone else when you asked him.
Okay.
When Ice Baby took the backbeat from Under Pressure, it wasn't stealing material. It was an homage because he liked it.
Yeah.
That's the difference. Yeah, so back then it was popular to do an homage to another piece and just add to it. The problem is that it doesn't follow any of the reading of any of the spiritual stories, which is how I know it's fan fiction.
Right.
Now, I don't think that most Christians have the discernment to say, oh, wait a minute, it doesn't match. They think it does match. Of course, they think that slay means kill.
Right.
They think that war involves justified murder. They think that they think that the laws on slavery have something to do with indentured servitude of whatever level, be that antebellum slavery, be it chattel slavery, be it whatever. They think that that's a topic in the text, and they argue it, which makes me sad.
You listening, G-Man?
Well, listening to G-Man will make a person sad, trust me. But,
Yeah.
but what did you mean? Did I listen to G-Man?
Yeah.
No, I said, are you listening, G-Man, about the slavery thing?
Oh.
Yeah, he needs to learn that lesson. Yeah, it wasn't all.
I've heard all the arguments.
Yeah.
I've heard the academic arguments, which I think Dr. Joshua Bowen is mainstream enough that he represents a majority and does that quite on purpose because he really respects the work that he put into his doctorates. Okay.
Yeah.
So he's being very middle of the road on purpose when he says those things. It's not his opinion.
Right.
It's a majority opinion. In fact, you'll be hard pressed to get Dr. Josh to speak his personal opinion on anything but family. But anything academic, he's not going to say that in public what his opinion is.
What does he say about it?
What does he say about biblical slavery?
Mm-hmm.
It's evident. Okay, I don't want to disrespect the man. I can't perfectly present what he says. This is an accidental straw man, but I'll do the best I can.
Right on.
Because I respect that man. He's a friend of mine. Okay.
Granted.
Okay. So this will not be an accurate enough representation. It'll be way too brief. Not that the stories are true in history, but the people justifying how they thought about life had them write stories that justified their present tradition. Okay? So that they were justifying their use of slavery of foreigners and wrote that down as the word of God. Thereby, it is authoritarian.
I see.
It is a fact. Something like that. That's not perfect.
Okay.
Nisha. Hello.
I'm not Nisha.
Respect Krishna. No, you are not Nisha.
Yeah.
You're
Hi,
neither
Nisha.
tiny,
Well, you could
nor
have told
pretty,
me.
nor female.
You were the anti-Nisha.
The universe is tiny, Richard.
What's that? I'm pretty tiny compared to you. What's that?
I said the whole universe is tiny, Richard.
Depending on what you compare it to, yeah, it could be.
Yes, sir.
Peace and respect, Green Soul.
So,
I should just go ahead and do that.
We were talking
So I asked
about,
you a question earlier, Krishna. Did you come in to answer?
Please ask again. I'm been very busy today. What's up? What's
Okay.
the question?
You were in chat at the time. I asked if your philosophical view of Hinduism would include a mass exodus of human beings off of this planet by the gods, performed by the gods.
Only by death, I guess.
Okay. Well, that's not a mass exodus unless there was a sun exploding or something.
Yeah. There's no. Just exodus through death and rebirth, reincarnation. That I know of.
I think that where the Bible is saying Jesus Christ is a job, it's the Bodhisattva is a job.
Well, the Buddha
and
is a job. It's a job title.
The Buddha is, yeah.
Yeah, his name
Right.
was Siddhartha. The Buddha was his job title, and a bodhisattva I heard defined once as a one of the Buddha or the Buddha-like people who has discovered life, how to live life fully. Which is, of
I've
course,
heard it a
very-
little bit more defined than that, as one who voluntarily returns to the earthly plane to help others.
Yes, that too. Yeah,
Okay.
That's
You already had that.
pretty much
Okay.
what I intended to convey.
So I'm not really actually adding anything. Okay. Okay. Thanks for the answer.
You're
Appreciate
welcome,
that.
sir. Yeah, I believe in the one God, and just everyone's just like you are to one person a father, to another a brother, to another a lover, to another mean old guy that passes him on the street, to someone else, you're a professor, to someone else you're a jerk, as someone else you're a good employee, to someone else you're a horrible employee. It's just the one
And
God
you're
is
comparing that to what?
the one God being viewed by 8 billion different human minds.
I see. Yeah, I've made the argument before, and I will uphold, I think, permanently, that anyone who has a stance, a religious stance of some kind, and that's too general. It could be more, it's not necessarily a quote unquote religious stance. They have their own God. So how many religions are there? As many as there are religious people.
And that is exactly what is behind the 33 million gods in India, which of course is now probably more like 1 billion, because their population has increased.
Yeah, people tend to reproduce. Yeah.
Wild Hot, your beard looks freaking hot, wild, and fantastic. I hope you keep growing it. I mean,
Admit it,
really,
man. You've pubed. Quit denying your own puberty. You're not 12.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And
At least
thank
now
you,
you're-
Mike, for being in the chat. Yeah, thanks for that.
At least now when you mess up and cause yourself a bunch of hellish pains for a few months, you'll look good while you're screaming in pain.
It's going to happen. It has to happen.
If you do it again.
Be determined.
We should all look good when we're riding in.
With that beard and semi-wild hair, you look like you're probably a professor of archaeology.
Yeah,
Definitely. A wild professor look.
Yeah.
So I've got
I'm
notifications
thinking
going off left, right, and centre. Okay, sorry.
Leatherman.
Okay. The show is yours. Yours is for you guys anyway. Anyone can say anything, and we'll talk about it.
I love you.
I love you too, brother.
Nice.
Yeah, I will.
Well, coming up on Passover, want to do that? Want to talk about
Yeah.
Passover?
What's Passover?
You want to pass over it?
Actually, it is about passing over something, or something passing over. It is.
It's where the Jews put the cross on the door so that God would know not to kill that particular child. Thanks, guys.
That's part of it, sure.
Yeah.
It's the Spirit of God that passes over. That's what it says.
The all-knowing God would know not to kill that child. That's a weird bit. Why do you need a cross on the door?
But the all-knowing Wild Hat, at least in my position, my understanding, is your upper mind. So it's all-knowing about everything you ever saw and heard and tasted and did and experienced. That's the all-knowing part of God that's in you, that part of that psychology called God. And I'll be quiet because I know I've probably raised a lot of eyebrows and heat with that one.
No, that's fine. From your point of view, that's perfectly
Hey,
correct.
put the pitchforks down, guys. Come on.
I'm just saying from the biblical point of view, it is an all-knowing God, a God that literally knows everything.
There is
Well,
no
everything.
claim like that in the Bible. That's a claim that Christian made.
Yeah.
Just to be clear.
I think the idea that God would know everything that God, had access to know is a much better, it's a much more reasonable thing to claim, God knowing literally everything, that makes God basically meaningless, that makes God sort of an amorphous overmind that, can't really be discussed in any kind of meaningful way or interacted with.
That's why people who hold to that have such weird arguments that just sound like word salad. That's exactly why. Because you can't make sense of an idea like a brainless mind. Good luck. Mobile atheist, I'm going to need you to turn on your camera temporarily. You can shut it back off when I bring you on. I'm going to need you to touch. Oh, it's Sammy. Crap.
Who? Hi, mobile atheist.
Changing his damn name. I don't know who
He
you
always
are.
confuses me when he's not in the arms of Jesus. Yeah, that always puts me off.
Howdy, Sammy. Welcome.
Is my
Sammy,
audio good?
It's a little bit shallow and a little bit echoey, but we can understand you.
Awesome. Hello, gentlemen, and any non-gentlemen, if there is any.
We all have our moments, Sammy.
Indeed.
I think I'd be the closest to that. Yeah.
No, that's true.
What's the discussion, boy?
Whatever you talk about.
We've been talking about religious topics, but we don't care. We can talk about go-kart engines if you want, whatever you like.
No, we're not talking about go-kart engines. We're sticking to some kind of philosophy.
Oh my
Something.
God! You act like you own the place.
That's
do.
reasonable.
The Dr. Fox's stone date theory. I think Sammy might like that as well for some reason.
We could talk about that. Origins of consciousness.
I
Yeah,
think.
well, I'd like someone to explain it a bit more.
Okay. So from what I understand of stoned ape theory is we have a hard time justifying the great difference in awareness between a human being and the rest of the evolved apes. Okay? So we have this massive brain, and it's way too smart for just survival advantage, and that's hard to justify. So stoned ape theory is a possibly mushroom or some kind of a lichen or bacterium or something that got us drunk when we were in our evolutionary, well, we're not out of our evolutionary process, long ago in our evolutionary process that started that caused us to look at the world differently. You've heard people like on PCP or whatever other mind altering drugs say things like I had loss of self, loss of ego, things like that. So the idea is that some kind of drug-induced brain state caused us to look at things differently, and we started interacting differently with our environment, allowing our brain to increase in size. Something like that.
Which is interesting considering that I thought intelligence was sort of seen as going the opposite direction, and that ego or self-awareness is what we gain, whereas that's sort of talking about stepping outside of that, but that implies you've already gained it. begin with. Am I making sense?
So far. I think you're not done talking about it, though.
That is pretty much all I wanted to say. I guess that's to pose it as a question.
Well, let me ask you a follow-up. Maybe you can flesh it out a little bit more.
Kind of, here we go. Yeah, there is a little bit to add or to clarify it. I guess to me that's implying that
There we go.
taking the hallucinogenic has increased our intelligence, to put it simply. And I find that, difficult to believe.
It would only need to increase the intelligence of a few, though, to be able to teach others what they've learned and start spreading.
Can you believe we have a cognitive biochemist in the house? Well, I would be remiss to not invite you in. The invitation is pinned at the top of the chat, Dr. Cross.
Wow, yeah, please. Pick your
Yeah,
brain.
I saw her channel. She's actually pretty, seems to be pretty knowledgeable about this kind of stuff.
See, what I like for me, because I took a lot of hallucinogenics when I was younger, and it was all very subjective, very, very subjective. Versions of my my epistemic foundation, what was already there. And looking back, at the time I might have thought I was gaining things, spirituality or this or that, but looking back, I guess all I can say is I gained experience, but you gain that every day.
This is exactly why I make my argument from information. Because my biases and my memory and things I've forgotten, I remember. And all of that experience can be perceived as profound by me or by someone else, But that's not novel, new information to the planet. That would be my experiences of things that have happened. And that's not even, it could seem profound. I think I see what you're saying.
I guess another way to look at it is they eat hallucinogens and intoxicants and things like that. They get drunk. Cats eat catnip. Is it? And are those animals sitting around having profound thoughts of some kind?
I'm sure they're having profound experience of some kind, profound to them. It probably wouldn't be profound if I experienced exactly the same thing, but with my past experiences. I have to take into consideration the 5-year-old who screams and cries at a scratched knee. And now, at 50, almost 53 years old, I can be lacerated pretty good and dripping blood onto the floor. And maybe I won't notice until I notice the red color on the floor.
Yeah.
So I think it's a comparative thing.
Really, subjective. Yeah.
So Richard, do you think there is a startling or significant difference between what humans experience as consciousness and what the other animals experience as consciousness?
I've seen a scientific approximation that is, intuitively understandable to us. The second most aware animal on the planet is the bottlenose dolphin.
Okay.
If you did the bottlenose dolphin's awareness in postage stamps, and you made it the standard, it would be 1 postage stamp. Okay.
Okay.
Our awareness would be 3 sheets of paper. So literally hundreds and hundreds of times more aware.
That's interesting.
For instance, I could hold a mirror up to a bottlenose dolphin. It will recognize that the mirror is reflecting itself, and that's not another dolphin.
Okay.
By the way, rats can notice that, and cats can't. Which means rats are more aware than cats, which is interesting. It might be the smarter species, but peace and respect also SFB mod Odeon. Nisha, if I forgot you earlier when you came in. But I can say to you, did you ever notice that you notice things? How do you feel about noticing that you notice things? And when you consider that you have feelings about thinking about knowing and noticing things and you're aware of them, what's your awareness of that like?
Right.
See, you can go like infinite level deep with a human on awareness. There's actually seems to be no end to how you can think about that. Because you can think about thinking about it. In fact, you can think about thinking about it.
Sure.
Okay. So it's that different.
So what happened?
Oh, that's simple. A natural evolutionary process happened on Satan's planet. Eventually, his scientists messed with those slave animals so much and added a little bit of their own DNA and advanced it too much, making Adam. And we are a reduced set of Adam. And when we're completed or freed genetically and the rest of our DNA codes, we will be angels. So I'm not sure we could even call ourselves human beings right now, but with that we are man. Something like that. So what happened was we're missing some of the steps because there's a morality problem. At a certain level of consciousness, you can't treat the thing like an animal. It would have been immoral of Adam to transfer that onto this planet and let it be dinosaur fodder. You know, saber-toothed tiger fodder, whatever. That would have been immoral. But if you're doing a military campaign or just a bushwhacking campaign, pathfinding, what you do is you send the dogs in front of the soldiers. You don't send out, you know, the ones that you count on who are necessary to your mission and your objective as cannon fodder. That's stupid. So what Adam apparently does is set forth these proto-humans to beat some fear into the tigers and lions and bears. Oh my.
Right.
Right. And they take the heat and then we move in.
Okay.
Something like that. Which explains all the gaps in the fossil records and why the ladder-like stair steps between fossils that we do find. You see, something can't leave fossils if it's not here.
Right. What do you mean ladder-like stair? I've never heard you talk about the fossil record before. This is a new topic for us.
Abiogenesis and an evolutionary process that is like but not perfectly the same as Darwinistic evolution. That needs work, and we need to talk about like synthesis and post-Darwin in order to get more accurate. And there's still some problems, not perfect yet. Okay, we haven't figured out all the science. Like I said before, science is not finished.
Okay,
and that's fine. Okay,
yeah.
But some process like that happened according to the stories, and when that process happened, it resulted eventually in a very workable slave that was improved upon, and a mistake was made, and the damn thing was too smart. And they killed all of them but one, and that was the first Homo sapiens sapien, or human being in the universe. Okay. But it was so smart that it's hard for me to imagine how smart it is. And I know that we are a reduced edition of that. That is made a little lower than angels, and we have a death sentence of 120-ish years. Okay. And all that's imposed artificially. And we found the thing that is artificially imposed. It just, because we have nothing to compare it to, and lots of animals have it, and only the animals that don't have it. And we go, okay, well, that's just the way it is. And we don't question it on a scientific level.
That's the whole telomere thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Telomere death because of a lack of sufficient telomerase, which is locked away in our genetic material, although it's potentially realizable. I mean, it's already physically there. We just don't code for it. And all of that's because of quote unquote microRNA blockers, which should be removed from our genome, according to Science Magazine, by 2026. Or available to be removed. They can't remove everyone's because you become an immortal or an eternal being. So they're not going to do that for everyone. So, that's ever since that we found that. That's why you've been hearing sustainability. You've been hearing sustainability, green earth, recycle. You've been hearing it ever since we discovered that. By the way, it was within 2 months of each other. So then, in order to terraform this planet, you didn't need every variation along that evolutionary process. You only need to hit key elements because you have certain tasks to perform. You want them to perform certain things. Like when the angels put blue-green algae here, it was to start breaking down the underwater rocks into the more base minerals so that you can have soil. When they planted all the archaea, the inedible bacterium and things like that eat everything and nothing eats them. That was to further start breaking down the plant life. And then when there was et cetera, right through the fossil record, just like we see it. But you wouldn't need every variation along the way. For instance, if I said... out of a series of 1,000, right? Numerical sequence 1 to 1,000, right? And I said I am going to randomly select numbers, but they're going to be in chronological order. Or they're going to be in numerical order, okay? And I said 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50. This is not random.
Right.
If I said 5, 10, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 55, that's not random. There's a pattern there. If something were random, you would see no pattern. There wouldn't be a pattern. Now go look at any evolutionary process and how many proposed steps are missing in between any given set of well-established fossils. Go look at whales. From Pakicetus to Cetus, it's 1 missing 2, 1 missing 2, 1 missing 1, 1 missing 2, 1 missing 1, 1 missing 2, 1 missing 2, 1 missing 1. And I mean, just like almost every other one is there. And you'll see that on like all of them that we have lots of samples. In fact, they even stair-step it on the chart. That's why the chart looks so nice and even. So that's not randomness. It should be you have 1, you're missing 5. You have 1, you're missing 1. You have 1, you're missing 35. You have 1 or 2 in a row.
Right.
Never find anything like that. Never random. If permineralization or fossilization is a random process, it should be random. Go look at the charts. It looks like cherry-picked, which is what I think happened.
All right, I'll check it out. I never thought about that.
Oh yeah, all you have to do is think about like Richard Dawkins talking about human skulls, all the way back to the oldest proto-human. And then you say, "Whoa, it's obvious we came from that." Look, perfectly spaced. You can tell the progression, and they're all there. Well, gosh, would you think about that? They're perfectly spaced, and everything to make the chain is there. Are you kidding me?
What does that even mean, though? Perfectly spaced in that context. I mean, there's like the
About the
same
same
number of
amount of
years?
change per distance, but between skulls, about the same amount of change. Yeah,
Amount of change or amount of years of change?
amount of change.
Okay. So like 30% has changed or whatever. You could somehow quantify it to make it.
Yes, it is quantified.
Yeah. Okay. That is interesting.
There are people who've done that science, sure.
Huh.
It's just they don't think about it this way and go, "Wait a minute, that's a little bit too
Right.
perfect, isn't it?"
Right. Huh. Yeah, I'm gonna have to check that out.
Mm-hmm. And it doesn't matter which fossils you talk about, as long as we have a good broad range of them.
Okay.
I mean, if there's only 2 fossils, that's not a survey.
Right. Right. It's not something I've spent a lot of time looking at in the fossil record. I just,
Well, my mom was a science teacher. I'm a fan of science myself.
yeah.
Yeah.
Me too. I mean, I'm not a science teacher, but I'm a fan of science. I think science is a great method for getting to truth. So,
My mom went to the same college twice on full scholarship. Graduated cum laude twice with 2 degrees.
wow, bright
Yeah.
woman.
Yeah.
What were
Driven.
the degrees?
One was an RN, and the other one was a what do they call that? Shoot,
Another
college-ready
medical-
science teacher. I don't
Oh,
know
sure. Okay. Yeah. Nice. I bet you were surrounded with science.
Oh, I lived in the science lab. I lived in the science building, in fact, for years.
Huh. My father was professionally a chemist, so
Oh, that's
he
interesting.
expected a lot of scientific knowledge from me and talked to me about the scientific method early on in life as being important, and I definitely value that still.
I think it's intelligent way to minimize bias as much as logically possible.
Exactly, yeah, which is important. I'm glad that
Yeah. Well, it's the best
a
we can
method's
do.
been developed to address that problem. you know, definitely. Especially when we're talking about things like God and whatnot, we gotta make sure that our bias is minimized as much as possible.
Regarding evolution and the mysteries of evolution, has anyone here ever heard of the experiments with this? I forget his name, where this fellow passed certain kinds of light through chicken eggs as they were developing, and also with plants, and he allegedly was able to get some really wild results from these experiments as far as to what the animal or plant developed into.
No, interesting. You mean whether they developed into something healthy or not, or?
Or,
Hey,
it was,
tell us
or
that
something
everything you
else
know.
or not. What's that?
Tell us
What's what?
everything you know.
The chickens were able to develop into actually other kinds of creatures, if I remember right. And this is information on
What?
YouTube. There's YouTube videos about this. I'm surprised I've never heard much more about it. I don't know if it's been suppressed or if it was just bullshit or what. But what it caused me to think, hit me really profound when I first saw it, is our galaxy is spinning at 500,000 miles per hour at one rotation every 240 million years, which is, I believe, about how long the dinosaurs lived. So at various points in the rotation of our galaxy, we may be passing through waves of energy by supernovae and other intense celestial goings on. And
Okay.
if experiments like that are actually accurate and true, then perhaps these various celestial energies passing through us while we're developing in the womb, uh, perhaps they have influences
Hmm.
on us, and perhaps that even might explain some of the mysteries of astrology, which I don't put a lot of stock in, but at
Right.
least that's a solution. Over.
That's interesting. That's
I'll
really
try to
interesting.
find the uh, link to that, or at least one video of that guy doing those experiments, and share it with you folks.
Do you remember what creatures they were producing with this technique? Like, were they getting mammals out of these eggs, or were they more like reptiles, or?
I would have to go back. It was either they were much more healthy, or they were, I'm pretty sure that they were actually able to develop into various different kinds of creatures that were unusual.
So
And it wasn't
interesting.
radiation, it was, I guess, LED light. But these
Different
kind of
spectrum.
experiments could, and I think should be done with like electromagnetic waves of all varying frequencies and intensities and
Sure.
proximities of distance, LED, all sorts of lights, and not cruel, beastly like things, but
Right.
things that might affect. Anyway, let me see what I can find here.
Yeah, we'll show whatever you find.
Okay. I'll just find a video about it. I don't know if it would be the best one, but okay.
I mean, the best I could find based on what you said was some full-time researchers who removed the shell and filmed the development of a chicken in a glass container, literally like a shot glass.
No, this is specifically energy passing through.
Yeah, I knew that was wrong.
Yeah. I know you're only dense in certain areas, like myself.
I don't think you're dense. I think all of us are ignorant of certain topics. I don't think you're dense.
Oh, yeah.
Not at all.
Yeah, we're all severely wise and severely retarded in various things.
Sure.
Except for Mac. Okay.
I appreciate that. It accuse me of having any wisdom.
You may as well go on talking. I'll post it as soon as I find it. It might take me a few minutes.
That's fine. Okay, so I think the entire justification of the I'm sorry, the entire rationale for the justification of drugs altering us long ago is to account for the huge leap in brain mass, because there's really no explanation for that.
That's right. Specifically, the language centers developed quickly in a short period of time. And in my opinion, it's a reasonable explanation for that phenomenon. it's easy to imagine a primitive person or a primitive hominid stumbling across some mind-expanding, material that allows it to think in symbolic ways for the first time, which could lead to language. I think it's a compelling scenario, but it's one of those things. It's pure, speculation. There's really no way to.
Well, Mac, what do you think of the statement? I felt it was profound at the time, but it was only my prior experiences when I was in an altered mind state.
I mean, of course, that's a common thing you'll hear from people who indulge in different types of mind-altering molecules. But there's also people whose whole lives have changed for the better after those experiences, and who have learned actually like applicable truths for their lives. And very recently, and I mean, Dr. Cross, don't worry about what you look like. Get in here, because I'm gonna represent your field here quickly. But I think I've read recently that there's evidence that certain psychedelic experiences, at least, can lead to literal brain growth, like literal neuro pathway connections that that affect memory and attributes of our mind that would conceivably give us an evolutionary advantage if even if just a few people in a tribe had access to that. Hey, Odeon.
Hello, all.
Howdy,
Some
Odin.
respect, sir.
Anyway, so I don't think that I think that it's sometimes people come away from these experiences exactly saying what you're saying, and I think that I've come away from these experiences saying that personally. So I'm not trying to diminish that, but there's also another type of psychedelic experience, or another type of mind-altering plant experience, even if they're not technically psychedelic, that actually has like profound meaning and continues to, after the experience is over, have that profound meaning. And
this is exactly why some people deduce. You can't show it, but they will deduce that in certain mycelium, that there is actually knowledge contained in the mycelium. What you're experiencing is the past knowledge of the collected works of the mycelium, what they learned in their environment, or what they collected chemically in their environment, and you get some of that.
I've heard
and
that.
Somehow it translates into like understandable thoughts in our brains.
It's speaking to us like a co-evolutionary.
Yes.
Relationship.
The problem that I have with that is the sheer unlikeliness of the proposition, where it's really easy for me to justify communication when you pull a stick out of your butt and you learn to talk. It's real easy to say something like people are socially nervous and they don't like new or different kinds of interactions, and we're a little bit shy about that. But when you loosen up and you have a few beers, all of a sudden you're brave. Which I can show just all day long. But so I think it's a permission for prayer. Now, can that change a person? They can have like a huge epiphanies that change their lives. Yeah, absolutely, they can. You can have that kind of an epiphany if you could just like sit down with Einstein.
Sure.
I know I use his name too much, but
never.
You're good, Sammy.
Hey.
I don't know about that onesie for grown-ups, though.
It's going to change everything.
Because I'm on my phone, there's only so many pictures accessible. I didn't want to use any personal pictures and dox myself, like the kids or anything.
Right.
And that was a screenshot. It's an ad from a cheap online store called Wish. I don't know if you have it in the States. But it's a onesie for men, and it's
States, yeah.
And I think, if from memory, it might be like farting unicorns or something.
On the
Fucking-
onesie.
Yeah, hang on, let me turn the. Can't really see on the phone, but
Are they? If they're not universe farting unicorns, then I'm not really interested.
Those are the best.
well, this is it.
I mean, once you've seen a representation of a unicorn that can fart and create universes, all the rest of the unicorn farts are kind of unimpressive. You'll forgive me for that.
True.
Okay,
This is true.
Dr. Cross addressed what I claimed there, the iboga, which is a very fascinating plant. Changes neurochemistry for 4 months while you heal, and can be used effectively to kick heroin and opiate addictions. Then magic mushrooms are found to enhance brain connectivity by Hopkins in the late 2013s. Hey, Pixie. That's all I was referring to, stuff like that. I think that there is some evidence that, there's positive effects, and I'll accept that, any positive effects that they have ultimately come from God. I feel very comfortable with that assessment.
I think
Like
positive
Gary
effects can come from our direct experience and what we perceive, and it's not necessary there was an intervention. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
However, if something new is learned that cannot have been part of your experience, that's a different topic.
Right.
Wouldn't that fall within the realm of, I guess, enlightenment, so to speak?
I think so.
Well, that's literally what enlightenment
Hey,
means. I mean, how many times as children did our parents enlighten us about something? It was just absolutely mind-blowing. Like, for me personally, one of the stories I remember is you're going to want to kiss someone. And I'm like, there's no way that's going to happen. You're crazy. I'm going to do
up,
what?
man.
I'm going to feel what way about it? Are you sure? So, yeah, I mean, to me at the time, it seemed like an impossible story like that could never actually happen to me. That I didn't discredit my parents for having said things like that. I just thought they were weird. And I understood that it had something to do with having children, and I was one of those children, and they must have both had that experience and felt that way about it, and that's fine for them. But I knew it wasn't going to happen to me. That's ridiculous. I mean, I'm a logical 7-year-old. I'm not interested in all this emotional stuff.
Oh boy.
So do you guys think that people should kind of be more liberal when it comes to how they attain, like, at least understanding of whatever new piece of knowledge they gain? Liberal in the sense that, okay, sure, you can use whatever tools you've gained from philosophy, right?
Mhm.
But imagine like reading the laws, a book or a piece of work about the laws of logic, right?
Mhm.
While on shrooms.
Yeah.
Like, I'm pretty sure you'll come out with some really pretty interesting like perspectives,
If you could stay focused on it, for sure.
right? Because if these drugs have that, just purely looking at the physical effects it'll have on the brain, right? If it can have such powerful effects on the brain, just maybe we should kind of approach these things with a more, open-minded, approach to these things, because I think it makes so much more sense to just look at these things from various different aspects. And if you're just kind of linear in your approach, right, then I think you're missing out on the possibility of,
The way I see it, I think I'm picking up what you're putting down. But I think the way I see it is that there are available experiences to us as human beings. You know, we've identified them. There are, like, for instance, you can go and deliberately get frightened with a theme park ride or something like that. Like, we know about fear, scary movies and things like that. We know about exhilaration. We know about love. We talk about, we make art about love, you know, all the time. It's a very common topic to discuss and to, you know, explain that we feel. And then, of course, all of the melancholy part of the emotional spectrums and things like that. But there's also like being very focused and being very like tuned in and having like one of those flow moments. That's something that I think can be connected to some kind of divinity state or some kind of like connection with what is right and you know, what we feel good about when we align with in the universe. And then there are these what I can only understand as spiritual experiences, you know, where you have, you know, and a lot of those map onto the psychedelic experience. So feelings of oneness or feelings of enlightenment or feelings of dissolution, where all of the material things that you connect yourself with fall away, and then you still like find there's something left, you know, after all of that's gone. That's, you know, I mean, mystics have described that experience, and so have psychedelic journeyers. That same experience has been an eternally described one, and I think that that's significant. And I think it's something. I'm not saying that just because it's available that we should pursue it, but I think that if it's both available and reported to be valuable, then we should at least consider pursuing it. And I wouldn't outright recommend the psychedelic experience to everybody I know. In fact, I'm not a big proponent of it or a big enjoyer of it. I've done it a few times on different kinds of substances, and they've always been instructional and important to me. And I also am reluctant to ever do it again on any of those substances. So I'm kind of in both. I'm kind of in both places on that. So
You know what's fascinating is that so I don't do any form of drugs. I don't drink or anything like that. Mainly because I just prefer to just have a state of mind that's always clear.
hmm
Um,
sobriety is awesome.
yeah. However, uh, I actually had an edible. This was like a couple months ago. Had an edible, and it was actually at the job. Believe it or not, we were doing some work with one of our clients, and she invited me to do it. And I was like, you know what? It is what it is. It's already in the evening. I'm gonna be home or whatever, so it's not that
Sure,
big of a deal.
sure.
So I took one small gummy edible, and man, it was it was quite the experience
So
because
powerful sometimes.
yeah, man, because I don't smoke or do any form of drugs. So when it kicked in, it was actually pretty cool. And I was working. I I believe I was replacing the battery out of a laptop, and I was finishing up a design job for another client. And I was like in a really good mood. The creativity was going, no issues, right?
Nice, nice.
Um,
That flow
you know,
state.
yeah. And but after a while I found myself feeling so good. I started like naming stuff in my room. Went to the kitchen, started naming stuff, went to the bathroom, started naming stuff.
You mean
You know,
giving them names, or do you mean just pronouncing what they are?
I don't know. Maybe.
Like, oh, toilet paper, today your name is Fred.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
that kind of naming things. Okay. All
They
right.
all became people.
Yep. And then I went on to read some Zen koans, and it was pretty interesting, you know. And to be fair, when I woke up the next morning, I thought I had destroyed someone's laptop, which was like $1,500, and I thought I completely ruined all of my work. Lo and behold, everything was perfectly fine.
Weird, huh?
Yeah, right.
Maybe you actually were well concentrating.
Yeah, yeah. And for me, it felt like more of a enhancer, so to speak.
Mhm.
Mainly because all of those other things that was on my mind kind of just like floated away and made
Mhm.
space for more mental work to take place, and it offers me more concentration. So that was a pretty interesting experience. So that's
That's
why
awesome.
I came in. I was like, you know what? Have you ever considered taking this approach to all
We
this
got it,
intellectual
Richard.
stuff?
Thanks, Mac.
No, yeah, Richard's gonna go enjoy his favorite mind-altering chemical.
There you go.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Thanks for sharing that. I'm always interested in hearing other people's experiences, especially with marijuana, which I think is so it's so prevalent right now in culture that people forget that it can be a very powerful medicine, especially with you know, people that aren't habitual users of it, like myself. So,
Hmm.
but I've definitely been there, man. The highest I've ever been was on marijuana extract in some butter, and I just had a little bit of the butter. I mean, there's so many stories like that, but completely took me to a very unusual and uncomfortable place,
Oh
for
wow.
a few hours. Hey, Marty Camejo. Yeah.
It's fascinating because so I've been kind of looking up a topic um, that me and Richard could actually sit and engage in.
Uh-huh.
Um, and, I actually found something that we can deep dive in, and it's I guess, the mechanics behind belief and how it works,
Oh.
psychologically speaking,
Oh, interesting.
its influence on why people hold their beliefs and stuff like that.
Hmm.
So, I've been kind of looking, getting some content together so I can, share with him,
Nice.
so we can, just kind of have a conversation on equal footing and equal understanding to kind of give our perspectives on it. But I think that's one thing that we don't really discuss when we have these types of conversations,
Hmm.
right? Is okay, how do we believe, right? Not how in the sense that what are the things that happened, but like what
Right.
are these steps that happen internally, right? That get us to these points.
That is an interesting line of questioning, especially with somebody like Richard who, you know, I guess I was going to say who makes such outrageous claims, but I should say, I shouldn't make it so value laden. He makes such big claims, and he's come to some very, very startling conclusions, some very startling beliefs. And so exploring how he did or why he did, I think that's really valuable, but it would be for anybody considering any belief. I think that beliefs are demand examination, whether they're political or philosophical, or we should explore them. We should understand, how devoted we are to those beliefs and how flexible we are on them, and we should kind of understand the justification of them as well. But I think you're talking about more like the actual path, like the neurological path to belief, or
Yeah. So,
like setting events and things like that. Like, do most people believe in what they believe because they were raised with those beliefs? That kind of thing.
um, yes and no, but it's more philosophical in nature. I think it's called doxastic voluntarism or involuntarism, right?
Oh,
Um, and
no,
yeah,
not
I'm.
right. I don't know anything about that. I'm Googling right now, though.
you know, And so, it when I was reading up on that a little bit, you know,
Mhm.
I realized that you have, for example, people take the approach of propositional justifications,
Right.
um, as for the reason as to what led them to the belief, right? And then you have doxastic justification. And man, this shit, it's just this rabbit hole, man.
Yeah.
you know, so it's obviously it's going to go into the psychological aspect of it, um, which is pretty interesting. But I am more interested into the philosophical aspect of it. And I understand that it could probably seem a little bit nebulous, um, because typically when we have these conversations from a logical standpoint, people assume
Mhm.
that there's some kind of dichotomy,
Mhm.
right? And, not understand that sometimes these things can exist, at the same time,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, I get a sense of what this is about. Interesting. I don't know. I've known people that talk about choosing to believe certain things, and I don't think they mean the same thing that you mean when you're talking about belief. If belief is something that's like a knowledge claim that we'll adhere to as being true, um, for whatever reason. Oh, that is a cool line of inquiry. I love it. I don't know.
It's funny because I've been digging deeper into it because in one of the books that I'm working on, belief is super important,
Hmm.
right? And so it's like, okay, how would I explain the mechanics of this, right?
Right.
In a way that's interesting, that would get the intellectual to probably like, you know what,
Yeah.
that sounds familiar. Let me go look that up or something, right?
Right.
So that's when I came across this stuff, and I've always been interested into kind of figuring out the mechanics behind it,
Hmm.
you know. But it's there's not a lot of people who are willing to discuss it.
Well, I mean, there's not a lot of people that are willing to even like say, "Hey, what are my beliefs?" And kind of even examine them on that level, identify them. The
Hmm.
people don't go down these philosophical roads very, very like routinely. I think there's more people than ever doing that, at least in the value kind of realm of philosophy.
Hmm.
Like I think the events of the last few years have led a lot of people, or kind of forced a lot of people to confront what they value, and come to terms with that and prioritize those things. I know that I've had to, and it's been really a good exercise. But I think I think in general these things are uncommon. The examined life is uncommon, um, as pertinent as it is, and as important as it is to examine your life and examine yourself. I think it's uncommon to do that, unfortunately. Present company accepted, of course. That's what we're
Yeah,
doing here, I think. So,
I always wonder, um, why people would somewhat consider these things.
mhm,
Um, for me, mainly it's about um, understanding myself the best I can, right? Having the highest form of self-awareness possible. Because I
right,
think if you have really good self-awareness, I think it'll be easier for you to navigate, not necessarily just dealing with people, but
mhm,
just being a better human being,
right, right, totally.
you know? And so that's my reasoning for kind of examining these things and sharpening the mental tools,
Hmm.
right? Um, and so I definitely understand what saying, if there's value in it, human beings will definitely pursue it. But is it the type of value that'll lead to having a better existence?
Right.
So I don't know.
Respect Titan Uranus. I know I'm never going to say that like you want me to. And a little bit of business. Sleep just hit me hard, and that makes me stupid, which means I should bow out. Anyone who wants to come in, I'm going to give you 5 minutes to come in.
Thanks,
The
Richard.
link is posted at the top of the chat. You guys are, of course, welcome to stay and talk just as long as you guys want to talk to each other. But this old man's hitting the sack.
Thanks for
So
the
I'm gonna
time,
give
as
that-
always.
I'm going to
Richard.
give that 5 minutes. Oh, thank you. I mean,
It's
you
awesome.
make the show. Thank you so much.
Really a pleasure. I think my mom's been tuning in. Hi, Mom, if you're out there.
I had to come in and at least tell you good night and sleep well and dream easy and all of that.
Hey, Pixie.
Thank you, Pixie. You know,
Hi,
Pixie, if I didn't know better, I'd say you had a good heart.
Every now and then, but shh.
Just don't tell people, right?
It's a secret.
Yeah, Beast Channel handles the emotional side. I'm a fan of the logical side. Humans need both. So there you go.
Mac actually recently introduced me to your brother's channel, and it's been fun. It's been nice.
Yeah.
You're both
Such
very
good
good
content.
peoples. And when I
Yeah,
come
I'm
to
gonna
Santa
blame
Fe,
Mom on that one. Yeah,
when we come to Santa Fe, I'm gonna harass you guys. Just
cool
so you know.
beans.
It's awesome.
We'll treat you out to dinner.
Oh yeah, so Richard, I was speaking to Mac a while ago. So I did find something that we can really discuss that I think you'd be very interested in.
Let's hear it. Maybe it'll wake me up. Could happen.
So in short, it's exploring the mechanics behind beliefs. It's called doxastic voluntarism, and the idea is to figure out how we form our beliefs, right? I mean, yes, there are neurological aspects of it and psychological aspects of it, but the discussion would be more philosophical in nature. And so right now I'm just gathering up the material so I can share everything with you. So we can both, kind of
Wait,
read
what
through.
kind of a tease was that? Did you say you're not ready to talk about it?
No, not yet. I just want to get all my stuff together, and
Always a bridesmaid, never a bride.
Don't worry, I'll be a bride one day.
Okay. You say
Soon enough. I'm
We'll
doing it
see.
because it's for my book,
Okay.
and I figured it'll be something that you would be very interested in.
I am. I'm already interested. Yes.
Awesome.
Okay. It looks like Pixie was the only one that wanted to come in. Anyone else? Last minute.
Richard, I've been looking continuously for this video. I haven't found it yet. I don't know if it's online still. I'll continue looking another time.
Can I say thank you for your efforts?
You're welcome.
Dogsastic what?
Voluntarism.
Dogsastic voluntarism.
Yeah. And you have doxastic involuntarism.
Give me the word dogsastic. The rest of it I have.
Involuntarism.
No, the involuntarism and voluntarism I have. Give me
Yeah.
dogsastic. I don't know. I can't break down that word. I don't know enough Latin or whatever.
Is it some new romantic terminology?
Yeah, he's trying to turn me on. So far, it's working. I'm trying to encourage it.
Feeling a bit romantic myself.
I put the definition in the chat, Richard.
Okay, cool.
Wild! I haven't seen you in forever.
Hello. Let's see.
Hello.
Yeah,
I mean, I've typed at you, but I haven't seen you.
I
Yeah.
don't really understand it, but
It's like 6 o'clock in the morning here, so I've just been resting.
Is it appropriate if I just read this aloud?
yeah, I want to hear it.
Doxastic voluntarism. Not volunteerism, voluntarism is the right form. Doxastic voluntarism is a philosophical doctrine according to which people have voluntary control over their beliefs. Philosophers in the debate about doxastic voluntarism distinguish between two kinds of voluntary control. The first is known as direct voluntary control and refers to acts which are such that if a person chooses to perform them, they happen immediately. For instance, a song at a given moment. The second is known as lost my place. The second is known as indirect voluntary control and refers to acts which are such that although a person lacks direct voluntary control over them, he or she can cause them to happen if he or she chooses to perform some number of other intermediate actions. For instance, a person untrained in music has indirect voluntary control over whether he or she will play a melody on a violin. Corresponding to this distinction between two kinds of voluntary control, philosophers distinguish between two kinds of doxastic voluntarism. Direct doxastic voluntarism claims that people have direct voluntary control over at least some of their beliefs. Indirect doxastic voluntarism, however, suppose that people have indirect voluntary control over at least some of their beliefs. For example, by doing research and evaluating this. I've been saying this for years.
Oh.
Okay.
Nice.
You can become convinced of any position if you find enough evidence for it and you don't look at the opposite position. So yes, you do get to choose what you believe.
I did.
Some people would definitely fight you on that, Richard.
But you do. Let's say, for instance, I only looked into Darwinistic evolution, and I had never heard of nor studied any opposing theory, like Stephen Jay
Lamarckism?
Gould's punctuated equilibrium. What?
There's another one I think it's called Lamarckianism.
Lamarckianism is so disproven. It's not a plausible theory anymore. Sorry.
Okay.
I mean, it's observationally correct, but it's not genetically correct, if that's okay. So it's not considered plausible anymore. But punctuated equilibrium within an evolutionary process, which directly refutes the Darwinistic view of the evolution of species, is totally genetically and observably what is going on. That is to say, there are mutations that don't add up to anything until there's enough of them, it adds up to a large change.
Yeah.
I both agree and disagree. I mean, like, I agree with the way you're presenting it, but at the same time, like, if I could have chosen my beliefs, like, if it was actually a choice based on research, I think I would figure I would at least be some sort of theistic by now.
Say that again.
While I understand the way you're presenting it, particularly like in an informative manner, it's hard for me to apply that to all areas, right? Because like I've told you before, I spent a long time trying as hard as I could to believe. Like I wanted to believe. Belief was my choice. And I think that if it came down to only choice, even if I wasn't a Christian, I would probably be some sort of theist by now.
That's possibly fair, but tell me, and knowing you as I do, I think you're honest, which means you probably would have looked into both sides of every argument. Did you not?
Maybe not every argument, but every argument that I knew of. And then from there, I went to other religions and other cultures and other influences, trying to understand it and trying to dig deeper and looking at it from different angles. And like, I could never, like, I wanted to. That was the point of the whole search, but I was never.
Well, let me go ahead and make you a theist
able
then,
to.
if you wanted to. Is wisdom a thing? You believe in wisdom?
Don't listen, Pixar. Don't listen.
Well, I've already accepted his idea of God as an idea,
Oh,
right? Like, I get
that's-
that.
That's biblical definition of God, is what I'm
I
getting.
meant like believing in a deity, right? Like, I set out to believe in a deity. It was my choice to believe in a deity, and I wanted that, right?
I don't
If
know
it
how you
came
could,
down,
though.
if it came down to choice, I would think I would believe in a deity at some point.
That's interesting.
If you could make a positive choice to believe positively in a deity, you would.
Maybe not now, but if you rewound the clock about 10, 15 years,
Okay.
absolutely. I spent a lot of my life seeking
No, I
that because
believe
that's
you.
what I wanted.
I don't doubt that you're being completely honest in your disclosure of the past situation and your mind states. But if you looked into both sides of the argument, you would just become better educated on the arguments. You would not be persuaded because there is nothing definitive about any of the arguments.
Well, in that case, I would say that while your choice can influence your beliefs, information can influence your choice, and therefore it's not solely reliant on choice alone.
Right. It's also what information is available and what do you look into? What do you study?
That's fair. Okay, thank you.
Seems fair to me. Now, despite what Christians say, there is no exclusivity in the story of the Bible. It's just friggin' everywhere. And despite what Christians say, there is no mind of God as is described in the Bible or any of these stories. We are the ones who have minds. And just like a society agrees to some social standards, structures, and everyone who wants to be part of that society have to adhere, or at least appear to adhere, to those social standards or be dejected from the society. Those who agree on what Yahweh is follow Yahweh. That is Yahweh, a set of standards for that society. And evidently doesn't apply here.
And
Kinda
then
like
it would
a
go by, and then it would bring us back to choice because we get into social contracts
until some certain point when there is no choice. It's like
right,
it's
but
like
even the
if you were
choices.
standing beside me, you have a choice to respond to whatever I say, right? Or in this situation, you have a choice to respond whether or not you have a choice as to whether or not you respond to anything I do or say, right? Until such time that if I were to physically force you to respond, then it wasn't your choice. And that's what's being told in the stories is there's a point of intervention where we will have no opinion. It'll just be the fact of the state of affairs.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So until then, we have choices.
Well, I would argue even then you still have somewhat of a choice, right? Because the gnashing of teeth, right? Those that won't accept will never accept.
I think that's a really peculiar kind of crazy that would be that person, actually. And
Right,
when I do
but-
the only number crunching that exists in the story, the possible, not absolute definite failure rating, but the possible failure rating is a 1 in 264,000 plus.
Right, but I'm just saying at that point, like, it's still a choice to give up your choice, right? Like, you're
It's a
still
choice
making
to
a
give up your
choice. Right.
lost.
Okay, for example, like we have laws, right? You don't get to choose which laws you abide by and which laws you don't abide by. They just are and you abide by them. However, at one point those laws were implemented by social contracts and by choice. So
Sure.
just because you no longer have that choice doesn't mean it wasn't born of choice. Does that make sense? So in the same way, like if I accept the deity, right? If I accept the deity's proposition for salvation, for leaving the earth, for I am accepting that I'm giving up my choice to follow these rules, and therefore it's still kind of a choice to give up my choices.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
But is that is that more conscious or subconscious? Is that a conscious decision or
both?
is it subconscious?
It could be both or either.
Okay.
I mean, let's just say, for argument's sake, that what is spelled out in these ancient religions actually were to happen, and at such magnitude that human beings on this earth simply don't have the technology power to accomplish those things, and that it used up resources that were irreplaceable. Okay, like just the story of brimstone in stories of dragons and in ancient myths in the Bible. I mean, just everywhere. Brimstone literally means sulfur. Well, there's only so much sulfur, and once you burn it, it's gone. You don't get more. You would have to wait for an evolution of a star and several of them to happen, and gravitational collapse and formation of another Earth to get more sulfur at that point. Okay, so you're just not going to be able to wait for that. So there's zero chances of having enough sulfur to do it twice. So the one time that it happens, it will be remarkable and unmistakable. And if all of them are like that, using up resources at such magnitude that humans simply can't accomplish it, then there would be not much argument for this ain't that event.
I get that.
Sulfur. No, not sulfur. So I think a person may have a choice as to whether or not they're mentally stable. They could say, okay, I'm crazy. But I think you couldn't maintain that for more than several days. Your brain would switch over and you'd accept the new paradigm, even if you thought that at first it was evidence of your demise, your mental failure. So I don't believe Matt Dillahunty when he says, if God wrote my name in the cloud, I still would have to think it was not God. I just have to say, what's wrong with my brain? But if everyone around Matt Dillahunty simultaneously looked up and said, what does that read? And the 10-year-old girl says, Daddy, it reads, Matt Dillahunty, I am your God. And that just kept happening for 7 years, he would accept that it was actually happening. Because the rest of his reality is apparently working. Why is that not real? So yeah, you can maintain it for 5 minutes.
Yeah, because he has a control, so to speak, right, to kind of work off of. Yeah, that makes sense.
Sure. I mean, we do that to each other all the time. You point at something because you're curious if you're crazy. You point at something that's unusual and you say, hey, did you see that? And the other person says what it was. And you're doing that to make sure you're not crazy.
Yeah.
And on that blaspheme, I am going to have to leave. I'm very tired. Thank you, Richard. It's been brilliant. Thanks,
what
everyone.
blasphemy means.
Later, Wildheart. Be
Good
awesome.
night, Wild. Sleep well and dream easy.
Cheers. Thanks.
So I don't think it's true. I think you could only maintain that kind of a view for so long, and it would be a special kind of crazy to be able to maintain something like that for 7 years straight, every day of 7 years. I don't think a person could do it normally.
So I haven't. I don't really have a strong opinion on it as
On
yet.
anything?
No, just on this aspect of the argument, because I haven't looked at the opposite perspective as yet, not in detail. A lot of what you express, you'll actually find some of that in literature. It's more simplified, obviously, because in these papers they try to not make things super complicated, right? But
Wait, are you saying I'm saying it in a complicated way? I'm trying to be as simple as possible.
um,
I'm failing, aren't I? Okay. Well, thanks for letting me know. I'll work on it. But if you could be more specific, that would help.
no, actually, I think your explanations are more relatable.
Okay.
I prefer it. I prefer something to be more relatable versus just being more simple, if that makes
Okay.
any sense. I haven't looked in the opposite enough yet to form any strong opinions on it,
You'll forgive
or
me.
to
Which
even challenge
opposite
any.
argument would that be?
Involuntarism, as in,
Oh, okay. We're back to that. Okay,
yeah,
yes, I'm fine now.
yeah,
It looks like involuntarism is only indirect doxastic voluntarism. That's what it looks like to me.
I could probably see that. I mean, just my rudimentary based understanding of it is just that you absolutely have no control over that belief. It's not even subconscious. It just happens. And so wherever the mental dice rolls or and lands on, that's what you get, right? It might not necessarily be under every circumstance, but at base, right? That's whatever that dice rolls, that's what you're gonna get, and that's it. And then your other beliefs are going to be formed based off of that.
Okay, in this definition, it reads, let me back up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Refers to acts which are such that although a person lacks direct voluntary control over them, he or she can cause them to happen if he or she chooses to perform some number of other intermediate actions. So what that's saying to me is it's the natural repercussions of what you did voluntarily choose. Even though you didn't choose that outcome, you set it up to happen.
Yeah.
So it's like extended voluntarism. Or lack of foresight voluntarism?
Probably. You know what? It's just one of those things where it's like, initially it just seems counterintuitive to me when I first started reading it. But to be fair, I haven't given it a fair shot. So,
here's what I found true about myself. Until I learned some of the philosophic terminology,
mm-hmm.
The way they were using the English language didn't make sense, and some of it seemed counterintuitive. Like if you said to most people who weren't educating themselves on this topic, and you said, "Is that a formal or an informal fallacy?" Well, they're thinking like, "Is that appropriate fallacy or an inappropriate fallacy?" They're thinking of it like in social structure terms.
Yeah.
Right? So that's not going to make sense. But that's not it's not what informal means. It doesn't mean that you're wearing a pair of jeans with your button-up shirt. What it means is it's talking about the form of an argument.
Mm-hmm.
Is it in the form is it an offense to the form of a structured argument or not? That's what the question really is. But they don't say it that way.
Yeah.
They say formal and informal. Well, formal doesn't mean suit and tie in this context. So until I understood that, I was like, what do you mean it's a formal or informal fact? What the hell? They don't have morality. They don't know social structures. It's just logic. So until I learned some of those terms, it didn't really make sense to me. And I think, I've opened my mind more and looked at the language in a slightly different way. So when I read something like this, I'm okay. Even though I've never heard those definitions before. And yes, he gave me Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy, which is a commonly cited, relied upon consensus kind of thing. So
what about Stanford?
It's a fine
Do you
source.
find that to be a decent source?
No, this is the first time I've read a definition from a peer-reviewed source on this kind of subject matter.
Okay, gotcha.
All the rest of it is everything that you've ever heard me say about these things is not because I studied these things, but just because of my experience with religious stories.
Gotcha. It's interesting because I remember this was like years ago when I first started kind of dabbling into this stuff, and I went into a conversation, and the gentleman asked me to explain why I believed what I believed, and I gave him this stupid jargled explanation that was incoherent, and he's like, "Listen, go read some philosophy. There are YouTube videos," and I was like, "What? I don't need to."
It'd make you speak gooder.
What's funny? Is that the second time around I saw him, I actually asked him for some videos, and he sent me this super long playlist, right? And I was like, dude, I'm never gonna understand any of this. And he's like, think of it this way: most of this are tools that you already use intuitively. You're not. It's just that you're not conscious of them, and so you don't know how to sharpen them. All you're doing is sharpening these tools.
Right.
And man, my mind was blown, and I went balls deep in there.
I'll tell you, and here's some real world application, okay, and why it's important that you should study law. Everyone should. Okay, you're already a philosopher, but right now, if you don't know what to look at and how to look at it, you're a bad philosopher. Okay, but you're already a philosopher, so become a better one. Okay, and here's a real world example. My greatest income source is a singular person who has properties, and I work for this person improving or repairing properties. Okay. One of the properties that they're looking at purchasing is a very, very remote location. It is on the other side of where the electric wires stop. Okay. So it's going to be completely detached from city water, city gas, city electricity, anything like that. Which means we have to create a livable environment as like a vacation rental place that has to be self-sustainable. Okay, so we're looking at all that. There is already a well on the property, and she hired a local firm to go and test the well. She met with the people on the property for the testing. They made some suggestions as what could or should be done to the water system. And they used an ohm meter to read the coils on the pump. It's a submersible pump.
Yeah.
It's like 500 feet down, more. Okay. And they billed her $700. She told me this, and I said, did they test the well? And she said, yes, they told me that it ohmed out correctly. I said, well, what does the ohmed out correctly mean? She goes, I don't know. I said, it means the coils and any voltage reducer or whatever is in line with the motor are all connected, and it has the right amount of resistance. That's what that means. Okay. I said, does that prove to you that the pump works? And she said, well, I don't know. I said, Is a pump just a motor? No.
No.
You see, it's not. It also has a pumping device on the motor and a thing to connect the two of them. And any of that could be broken, or the pipe could be rusted through. You still don't have water. So an ohm reading does not test the well. She said, well, would you talk to them on the phone? I got the owner of the firm to admit they deserve no money. And she canceled a $700 check.
That's awesome.
Okay. That is the sort of thing real practical learning a little bit of logic will do for you.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, it matters in real life.
Yeah, it really does. You know, you know what's funny too? I've kind of developed another level of patience.
I told her she has to give me half the 700. But anyway,
fair enough.
still saving her 350, right?
Right. You know, I think a lot of it too is that you develop a certain level of patience with people, right, and how you approach people, and it also helps you to express super complicated thoughts that you might have.
Sure.
Right. And you know, for me, one of the craziest things I've ever done was that I decided that I wanted to write my own argument to basically, you know, justify a claim stating that the universe is specifically set up or designed to create extremely complex things or life,
arrangements.
Right? Arrangements, sure, okay. Right? Highest being, I guess you can call it life. We haven't seen anything else that's, you know, more complicated so far.
Or maybe we can't see it.
Yeah, or maybe we can't see it. Yeah, whichever. But we're just talking. Yeah, we're just talking about the end result, right? And right. Man, listen, I started off with like this 4-page. No, it was like 6-page essay. Then I went down to 3 pages. Then I went down to 1 page. Then I went down to like, you know, a couple paragraphs, and then I went down to 3 simple lines.
Mm-hmm. And those right? 3 lines are?
Fuck, I don't remember. I gotta find it. I think you'll enjoy it.
You're just a tease tonight.
Yeah, man.
You'll bring something up. You don't produce. I don't know what's going on here.
The point that I'm trying to make ultimately is that
do you have any children, or are you just a tease? I mean, how far does this go?
I got you.
What are your intentions with this stream?
Right?
Have her back by 10.
You know, what I had learned was that the more you can simplify an idea, right, a complex idea, you know, it just kind of shows how sharp your tools are. Right, kind of like just with any tool, you use it a lot, you'll get more efficient at using it. You'll probably even create another version of it that could perform the job better. Right, and so when I was tasked with doing, you know, that little project, I didn't understand why I should even do it, but the person's like, just do it. Right, and when you reach the end, right, you will understand. And man, yes, I understood.
Yep. Well, tell me what you think of this. Necessities from the Bible. God rests the Sabbath day from all his creation. Man is part of God's creation. There's still work for God to do with man. God is not resting from man, this earth has had no Sabbath.
Oh.
So by necessity, in order that the Bible is telling the truth that God has past tense rested from his creation, it must have been a separate creation, not this one.
Not this one.
Makes sense, doesn't it?
Hold on. Is it wouldn't that technically mean that we're somewhat still in the Sabbath?
We're starting it. We call it end times.
End times. Oh, got it now. Got it now. That's interesting. I never looked at it that way.
That's why all of his work would be finished on the end of or on the beginning of the seventh day.
Huh. I never looked at it that way, to be honest.
I know. I'm really weird. Yeah.
You do.
Now, how do I form that? How do I write that as a formal argument? I don't know which which style to use, which form to use.
I would use a more inductive approach. I wouldn't use deduction. I think there's too many. Maybe, to be fair, I'll just say this: my mind is muddied because I am a believer in the event of the Bible, and so there are these nuances
that the Bible,
in the word of the Bible.
I thought you said events.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I don't. This is how I look at it, just in general. For me, I just look at it as being a tool. I don't have any way to kind of demonstrate that these things actually happen, how they happened, or even how I might perceive them.
It's
right?
fine. It's fine as a tool. What's the intent of the inventor of the tool?
My personal opinion on that, or
well, yeah.
I think
I want an objective, godly statement. That's what I want from you.
You want to claim?
Come on, Jill. You can do better than this.
I think it has two purposes. I think it is to allow humans to reach their full potential through love and goodness, while allowing, and by doing that, it'll allow us to have a more closer relationship with the creator, so to speak. Creator meaning in whichever way it might manifest.
Okay, humor or not, that was satanic of me. I apologize to everyone. I'm sorry about that. No, that seriously was. I shouldn't have done that. Okay, so some of the necessity of what you just said there. Okay, I should establish. Is it required of you that you do it?
Is it a requirement? No.
Yeah, is the reader required to put in their best effort and try to become everything they can be, the best of the blah, blah, blah?
No, not necessarily. I think the various stories that exist in it speaks to multiple circumstances, which I think everyone can kind of read and kind of put themselves in a particular position to where they'll be able to learn, what might be the best way.
Sure, but how do we know that's not our personal biases?
I don't think there's any way to really know that. I think you have to decide. It depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking to be a good man, and let's say you look at the story of Jesus Christ, and that doesn't help you towards that, maybe the story of Job might, or Jonah, or I don't know, maybe even Genesis.
Oh, that sounds. Story shopping is like church shopping. You're just finding something that agrees with you.
Sure. Um, but if you don't necessarily even know what you're looking for, right? I don't
Mhm.
necessarily think that, you really have a choice but to pick something, right? But
Mhm.
picking something doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to go with that thing, because you have to figure out to you have to learn whether or not it makes sense for your life and your circumstance.
Okay. You've probably heard this. I'm boring some of you. Sorry. There's an expression in literature: "No Tyndale, no Shakespeare." And what that means is Shakespeare's genius was studying Tyndale's work in translation into English from the Hebrew of the Old Testament. And the reason that Shakespearean plays are written on multiple levels simultaneously is exactly that reason. The Bible is written that way.
Interesting.
That's just a fact of history. So is there something in there for the slapstick comedian? Yep. Is there something in there for the extreme tribalistic prejudice person? Yep. Is there something in there no matter what your walk of life is? Yes, there is. Is that the intention of the screenwriter, of the playwright? Not necessarily.
Would you say it's a possibility?
Sure, but it's equally valid to say I'm biased.
Sure. I don't necessarily think anything is wrong with having a bias. I think what would be wrong is,
That's not wrong.
what wrong in the sense that, at least, you have to be conscious of it. And I guess with new information, right, it would probably be mentally healthy to be okay with changing it. If you're not those things, then you're wrong.
It's the definition of dementia and insanity that you
There's a lot of
cannot
insane
change.
people out there.
Well, I know, or they're demented. Either way, definitionally they're demented. I'm not kidding you. If you can't change your position and you must hold the position that you have, that's literally demented. If you can accept new information and change your position, because you are not your position, a position is something that you hold. And the reason we say hold is because it's very much like a piece of paper with a factoid written on it. But you see other pieces of paper, and what you should do is trade them out until you have the best pieces of paper. And then not decide that you have the best pieces of paper, but continue to look for better ones.
That's true, because so that was one of the issues that I ran into. So after coming to my belief in Christ's teachings, for example, right?
Mm-hmm. I don't even know what that meant. I'm gonna have to ask you clarifying questions on that eventually, but go ahead.
Oh boy. The stuff Jesus said, or I believe he says.
Oh, I know what you're
right. I don't some triggering. I should have said trigger warning.
Not for very many folks. It doesn't really need a trigger warning. Go on, please. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So once I got to that point, I still found it to be very hard to live the lifestyle that I thought that should be reflective of what I believe in.
Wait a minute. What do you mean hard to? Don't you mean impossible to?
Well, yeah, I accepted that it's impossible.
Okay.
But the attempts were very difficult and strenuous.
You can't do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so you know what? I was like, okay, maybe my view on these things are a little bit rigid, right? How do I, how do
No.
I make these adjustments? That
Hey, Odeon, that's not the problem. The problem is that you've assumed that you're the intended reader and you're supposed to do it. It's not that you're reading it correctly, and the standards are very, very high. But that's only because you're not the intended reader. Whereas the intended reader would read it and go, yeah, I can do that, of course. Oh, yeah, I've been doing that all my whole damn life, etc. No problems.
It's fascinating because one day, I don't know, one of my friends, he teaches English, and he's into Buddhism,
Mm-hmm.
and he posts a lot of Buddhist stuff in the Discord that we were a part of, and one day I decided to just start reading it, just out of curiosity. And then I got into Zen Buddhism, and one of the
Why? Because
interests,
there are truths in it? Why'd you get into it?
yeah, I found that there were some truths to it, and I found it to be very useful. Mainly, at that time, it's not the only thing, but at the time, the thing that stood out to me was the idea of having a free-flowing mind,
Okay.
not having a sticky mind. And
Right.
having a sticky mind, it can manifest in different ways, right? Like someone wrongs you, you hold
Yeah,
on to that.
like anger and murder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, something that simple, right? Like that idea never crossed my mind. Just like, how do you have a free flowing mind? That doesn't even make sense. Those are the things that I'm saying to myself. And I kept reading, and most of the shit didn't make sense because all of this information were just conveyed in stories that manifested in I guess, the technical form of jokes. And so
Okay.
none of this made sense to me. And you know what? I kept reading and reading, and then one day it just hit me. And all of the shit that I'm reading just started making sense. It's like you pull out the bucket from the bottom,
So
the
was it
bottom of
your
the.
choice that it suddenly made sense? I'm just kidding, right?
You know what? I was gonna actually give an answer for that, but let's hold off on that.
I'm just playing. Let that go.
But yeah, man, pulled out the bucket, pulled out the bottom of the bucket that's filled with water, and all of it came flooding through, and it just became so much easier to engage in my practice of Jesusism. I'm being facetious right there. I know
It's
I'm never
fine
gonna
word.
be like that, right?
It's
However,
okay.
it's
I don't care.
it's helped me a lot in making my life pretty stress free, maintaining really good relationships.
You seem like you're generally satisfied.
Yes.
Good for you. That's important.
Yes. And so that's this is what philosophy can do for people. All of this came from
I'd like to.
sharpening the tools.
Yes, absolutely. I'd like to further your experience of that in self forgiveness and understanding of what we are as an animal and as a child of God. Thank you, Mac. Peace and respect. Have a great night. Sleep well, brother.
All right, Mac. Sleep well.
Thanks, guys. Thanks so much.
And I'm not too far behind, but I'm staying for a little bit, so in case I slip out silently, good night ahead of time.
Peace and respect, Pixie. Thanks for dropping in.
Right,
I'm sorry I didn't get to hear any of your thoughts much.
No worries. I spoke up when I had something to say, and I've been listening.
I want you to know that I don't respect you for just being a human being any more than I do anyone else. But I do appreciate the operations of your brain. They seem intuitive and understandable to me.
Well, thank you. That is high praise coming from you, dear Richard.
Oh, that's high praise coming from you. So there you go. Okay, so if you'll grant the idea just temporarily
Mm-hmm.
that there are great demands and rewards in the stories, and the only one to actually do them and get all of those rewards is not some common populace,
Mm-hmm.
however small that populace may be, it's Christ. So in the idea that the only one who can actually be a perfect Christian is the Christ, then the intention of the tool itself is to describe the Christ. But to whom? And how would that be helpful whatsoever if everyone else who reads it but the Christ can't do it and only the Christ can do it? Now, as long as a person doesn't deny what I think is obvious in the text, a growthing, born of the dead, a change, woman, I am not, I am not yet able to, in the water to wine. That there's an evident situation A, situation B. He's not really Jesus till situation B,
Mm-hmm.
okay, which is growth. It's literal change for the better. It's growth. So then, the Bible is a set of instruction for the reader of the Bible. The only reader who can do it is Jesus. It's instructions for Jesus. Okay, now, to wrap up the total of that idea, there's only one unforgivable sin, and that would be rejection of the Holy Spirit, and by repercussion, heaven, Jesus, God,
Mm-hmm.
all of it, right? Because if you deny the Holy Ghost while you're experiencing it, then you have some like real mental issues. You'll deny anything, which is why it's unforgivable, if that makes sense. It's because it cannot be forgiven. It's literally unforgivable. Not it's so damned offensive God doesn't love you anymore. It's that
Mm-hmm.
it can't be forgiven. Because it's a situation of the person's mind that can't be fixed. No amount of
Interesting.
persuasive argument would fix that. Okay? So every other sin forgivable, every other sin you're capable of, your sin's forgiven. If that makes sense. Because it's not going to matter. And the only thing that would matter is the denial of God, angels, heaven, etc. And you keep yourself out voluntarily. So yes, God doesn't damn, we do.
You know, that's interesting. So one of the things that used to confuse me a lot was the concept of grace, what it means to be graceful. Like, how does God's grace manifest?
Can we do that real quick?
Yeah.
And then I'm gonna shut this down, which I promised to do several minutes ago. But anyway, I've been enjoying your brain, so I'm hanging in there. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Christians often say guilt, justice, grace, right? And they say the Bible claims all of those. All right. Here's the problem. In the face of guilt, I can justify grace. I can say, look, you made a mistake. I'm letting it go. Fine.
Mm-hmm.
In the face of ignorance or lack of knowledge, not an inability to learn, but a lack of knowledge, ignorance, I can say something like justice. Okay. And in courts, we have a sliding scale for any offense. And that's why you have to have a judge, is because a 3-year-old murdering grandpa with a handgun is not the same as his 25-year-old nephew doing it for the insurance money. It's not the
Yeah,
same
it's
thing.
not the same thing. Hmm.
Okay, so they're both murder. They're both a handgun. They're both blows to the head. They were both immediate kills. They were both on purpose. But the intent and the idea it's just a completely different thing. So we don't sentence 3-year-olds to life in prison because there's this scale. Okay, so it's easy for me to justify grace in the face of ignorance. But justify for me grace and guilt. There is no justification for that.
Really, can you deep dive into that a little bit more?
Okay, the Bible says we're ignorant,
Hmm.
which is the Bible saying God claims we're ignorant. My people perish for lack of understanding. Lean not upon your own understanding, etc., etc.
Yeah.
Okay, so it says we're ignorant, and it says God's aware we're ignorant. In the face of ignorance, grace makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
We don't know any better. He's withholding information. He says, I ain't got time to tell you. I got stuff to tell you. You wouldn't even understand it. How can I even tell you about heaven? You don't even understand the planet Earth you live on. Etc.
Interesting. Can I just stick a pin right there real quick? So it reminds me of the particular part of the story with Job where God showed him all of creation, essentially asking him, do you, can you do this? Do you know this? That whole particular scene right there.
Okay.
I never understood what it meant, but at the end of the day, it came back down to essentially kind of demonstrated that, hey, listen, you're making decisions and reacting out of ignorance, right?
Sure.
And you'll never be able to see the things that I see, and so be able to make the decisions that I make, right? And so understanding that, right, grace was shown to Job.
Right.
Got it.
I mean, it says he never spoke an ill word of God when he had. Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
He said he never sinned. In other words, yeah, you can say whatever the hell you want. It's not going to matter when the end of the story comes. Which is why Job is reinforced and rewarded by God, because he didn't know any better.
Yeah.
He maintained his faith, and that's the best that God could hope for.
It's interesting because even the parts where he was lamenting, right? It
Sure.
wasn't a situation where he was cursing, right? And necessarily even have any regrets. He was just doing what
cursed
was
the day he
natural
was
to him.
born. In that story, he cursed
Yeah.
the day he was born.
Basically.
Which was telling God he shouldn't have existed, which is telling God that God was wrong.
Yeah. But he doesn't
But he
know
didn't
any
sin,
better.
But he doesn't, because he's ignorant.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
okay. Why are any of us better than Job? Because we're proud of ourselves?
We aren't any better.
That's right. We're not. There's still the same rules apply. How many times in the Bible does it say, and many other works that we didn't write down here?
Oh, man.
The apostles ask of Christ, hey, JC, cool parable. What's it mean? JC says, I've got stuff to tell you. I don't have time for it. You weren't ready when I knew it. You're not ready to hear it now.
Mm-hmm.
And then the story ends. Well, what's the untold part? You see?
Yeah.
It's just not there.
So what about, do you think having that ignorance, along with the I guess the natural humility of not, of acknowledging that, do you think that helps with grace? And do you think that, because there are certain parts in the Bible where, specific characters, their hearts were hardened, right? And so
It's okay. Go ahead. Go ahead. I'm trying to follow
yeah,
you.
yeah,
I'm trying to follow you instead of present my view. But go ahead.
yeah. So the circumstances where these particular characters' hearts were hardened, was it a situation where, because they clearly weren't shown grace under those circumstances, I would argue, right?
You can make that argument in that mindset, sure.
Yeah. Because as far as they're concerned, right, they knew better. And they refuse, despite whatever events might have taken place that could change their perspective, belief, or whatever, right? Or, not necessarily the belief of the deity or the events, right?
Right,
but
their
heart,
belief on moral status.
on moral status, right?
Okay.
Do you think that that's an example of claiming that knowledge, that exclusive knowledge, right, while being guilty, and therefore they don't receive the grace?
Okay, can pride defeat grace? No. No, absolutely not. That would mean that if you believe you know everything, God believes you know everything. No, that wouldn't work at all, would it? It doesn't matter how much of a bastard you are. When you learn the truth, you'll change your mind. It doesn't matter how much of an asshole you are. If you saw heaven, you would think it was real.
See, but that's the thing. It's not necessarily belief in that sense. It's the belief of acknowledging one's moral perspective that's flawed. Right? The humility part of it.
Now I have to reveal what I think that story is actually about.
Okay.
You could call it a defect. You could call it inhuman. You could call it anything you want. Pharaoh and anyone else whose heart is hardened by God. There's actually two ways to read that, and I think that fundamental traditional Christianity has read it the improper way. Here's what I mean. You could, by just who you are and the way that you use words or the way that you think, offend the crap out of somebody you didn't even mean to. You agree?
Yeah.
Okay, did you harden their heart?
Yeah.
Did you do it?
I would
or
say,
is it something that was within them?
I would say yes. I would say
You
yes
did
that
it.
I would say yes, I did it.
Okay. Well, I appreciate your acceptance of responsibility. You probably have a fairly successful life and are a dependable person. However, if someone has an inability to understand you, like their brain, it's called a personality clash, right?
Mm-hmm.
If they have an inability to understand your position and they hold that against you, whereas most people easily understand your position and do not hold it against you, then the anomaly is in that particular person, not you. You see?
Yeah.
So Pharaoh, his heart is hardened by God. God hardens Pharaoh's heart is not necessarily an active. It's not a verb on the part of God.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
It could be that Pharaoh can't understand God no matter what, which is what the story actually describes.
Yeah. Oh, I see what you're saying. So
every time God does something, Pharaoh misunderstands it.
Yeah. What's interesting was that I never read that particular story that way, in that, God actually, like, the verb hardened his heart. It was
Yeah.
just more so God conscious. God knows, or at least understands that He's going to be continuously doing things that will harden Pharaoh's heart, and understanding this, He did it anyways.
Okay, all right. So I have to grant that the Father, which I think shouldn't be conflated with God, that the Father has such understanding that He would be aware of His acts and who would accept Him, who would be offended by it. Okay, but now you're just playing a numbers game. I'm not saying it's a game. I'm not saying you're playing a game. I'm saying it's just a numbers game.
Yeah.
What is your preference? Do you save all the Jews and offend the Pharaoh, or do you offend all the Jews and save the Pharaoh? So that was easy math, right?
Yeah, it was easy, man.
Because if you have only so many plausible choices without, I don't believe in magic. If there's only so many logical things you can do, and someone's going to be offended, who should you offend? Well, I think the moral choice was taken. Let Pharaoh suffer.
What's interesting though was that I'm somewhat going off the rails here, but I still think that to some extent, grace was still shown to Pharaoh, because from what I recall, he didn't die. Once the Exodus actually, like, took place.
Oh, there.
I don't remember.
The only thing that you could blame Yahweh in a physical death in any of the stories is those who can't accept heaven staying on the planet when the oceans are removed. And I'm sorry, that's not direct killing someone. And that's 7 years of effort to get them to not kill themselves. So I can't say that's really a moral issue for me.
Fair enough.
Even though for some people it might appear to be a moral issue. We should have done more, like overpower their will. Well, I'm sorry. It's not talking about overpowering people's wills. It's not what's going on there.
Yeah, and that wasn't necessarily even the goal, it seems. Right?
Right. Would you accept that, at least in some way of looking at it, it's plausible to say that in that story, Pharaoh represents evil itself and or Satan?
Yeah, he's a challenger.
Well, you know what the word Pharaoh means in the Hebrew language?
In the Hebrew language? No.
It doesn't mean king of Egypt. It doesn't mean that.
What does it mean?
It means a divider.
Interesting.
It literally, the word is divider. And the word Egypt is not Egypt either. It's limitation. And the word slave is literal slave. That is, and the land that Egypt is in, kosmios, means material reality. Okay, that's what those words mean to the Jews. So when the Jew reads that story, they hear, you are a slave who's limited and separated by materialism. That's a very different thing than what the Christian hears.
Fair enough. Because if you really think about it, right, these pharaohs didn't necessarily just see themselves as being kings. They see themselves as being gods.
Right.
The highest of the high.
No, now we're talking about history, not Bible stories.
Yeah.
Yes, the pharaohs actually saw themselves as demigods.
That's interesting.
But in the Jewish story of the Old Testament, the story of Exodus is describing how your mind, it's the Matrix. It's the story of the Matrix. That's what Exodus is. That you are trapped by your ignorance and your lack of ability to accept the reality that surrounds you. And you're stuck in the Matrix.
Oh boy, a lot of people love that blue pill, man.
A lot of
It's,
people prefer it. Yeah. So
it's called untalofloxacin.
ontolifloxacin.
Yep.
That sounds like a made-up word that has other words in it that mean things.
Yes, it does. Just
What
like
is it?
most words.
What are the root words of ontolifloxacin?
So ontology,
Okay.
right? Floxin um being the, I guess, uh the the delivery of that particular drug.
Okay.
Damn, how should I explain this? Let me see.
I feel like I'm 80% there. Be encouraged.
Let me see. Floxin. It's supposed to treat a form of ontological infection. Being awoken
Got it.
is
Got it. That
seen
was enough. You can
as
stop.
okay.
You can stop. It, okay. The floxin group are antibiotics or antifungals, right?
Mhm.
So it's a treatment of a disease of misconception of ontology.
Exactly.
Got it. Okay, good. I found a way to paraphrase it. Okay, that is very funny. Did you write that?
No, it's
No.
actually in the new Matrix movie where
Oh, really?
they were
I'm
pumping
so out of touch.
they were pumping Neo with blue pills,
Mhm.
essentially kind of keeping him trapped in a state of rejecting actual reality,
Mhm.
while keeping him, maintaining his belief in the current one that he's in, while keeping him depressed,
So
because innately he understands that that's what he's experiencing is
yeah,
not real.
yeah. So you have to oppress that. Oh my gosh. Okay, I'm going to stop now. For real. For real. I'm going to sleep. I'm not joking this time.
I'm
Um,
sorry, Richard, for tickling your
no,
fancy and teasing
I
you so much.
I appreciate your, how do I say, critical openness. If
Yeah.
that made sense, I appreciate that. So I enjoy talking to you for that reason. And by the way, congratulations on being basically happy.
Oh yeah.
That's it's noticeable, first of all, and second of all, it's a huge deal. So congratulations on that. All right,
Thank you.
I'm shutting this thing off, man. Final thoughts in 3 minutes or less.
3 minutes or less.
Yeah,
Oh man. I think critical thinking should be taught in schools.
it was.
Um,
They canceled it
oh, oh my goodness.
about the same time I was born. They canceled it in the U.S. It used to be part of regular curriculum.
That sucks. But they
You're
should
like, it wasn't
restart.
an
They should
accident,
start
bro.
teaching it again.
No, yeah, no, you got the wrong idea. See, governments don't make independent, intelligent, thinking people who can live on their own. That's not governance. Like, what kind of a definition of governing would that be? That's how to become unemployed as a governor. So, what they do is the exact opposite of that. They create programs that form dependency. They don't teach logic as part of regular school curriculum. You have to take that as a specialty course in college now. And they don't teach you how to live, like how to use a checkbook, how deep to plant the stem of your tomato. They don't teach you this stuff. That's not
Mhm.
an accident
Yes, I completely agree with you.
because they used to teach it.
I call them uh, the blue mist.
Yeah, it's
from the
about
blue
right.
pill.
Yeah, it's just sprayed in the air around here. All right, that's it. End of the show. No kidding around. Thanks a lot, Odin. Krishna, thanks for coming by. Don't know if you're still awake. Also, of course, MacTheHuman, Pixie Storms, Dr. Cross, Wild Heart, Iron. Who else did I see? Oh my gosh. I'm tired. That's what's going on there. Peace and respect to you all. Until next time, I want you all to know that I look forward to the day that we're all great friends. And by that, I mean together in heaven, which the chances of you that I'm speaking to right now not going to heaven, according to the stories, is literally less than a 1 chance in 264,000. And yeah, I can show you those numbers. So good night, all. Thanks a lot, Odin.
All right, man. No problem. Thanks for having me.